Chapter 6:14. The Jade Cave Grotto Heaven was located at the back of True Spirit Mountain, right next to the peak of True Spirit Mountain. As for the most important land of inheritance in Jinling, the True Spirit Grotto Heaven was naturally located at the peak of True Spirit Mountain. However, when Lu Ping went into seclusion at the peak of True Spirit Mountain, he did not discover any land of inheritance or Grotto Heaven magic treasure. The origin of the Jade Cave Grotto Heaven was quite dramatic. It was said that the Jade Cave Grotto Heaven was created by Tai Shan Laozu, the only person in Jinling's history who had attained true spirit 6,000 years ago. The Jade Cave Grotto Heaven was originally a piece of raw stone. A cultivator discovered that this raw stone contained a precious jade, so he opened the raw stone and happily left with the precious jade inside. However, the remaining outer shell of the raw stone was picked up by Tai Shan Laozu, who was passing by. At that time, Tai Shan Laozu had not attained Dao, but he was very knowledgeable. After picking up the raw stone, he hurried back to Jinling. It turned out that this origin stone was the real treasure. It was a Class 3 Supreme Grade spiritual material that had degenerated from a large piece of Heaven Grade Fey. Although the precious jade in the origin stone was also precious, it was just a mutated Class 2 spiritual material before the origin stone had degenerated into a spiritual material due to the influence of the origin stone that was still a Fey. Tai Shan Laozu used this raw stone as a base. Later on, he added a variety of rare spiritual materials and refined it into a Grotto Heaven magic treasure. Because its appearance looked like a hollowed-out jade cave, it was named the Jade Cave Grotto Heaven. After 6,000 years, the Jade Cave Grotto Heaven had become the second most important land of inheritance in Jinling, second only to the True Spirit Grotto Heaven. The Jade Cave Grotto Heaven had also condensed the fourth psychic treasure restriction and become a Psychic Grotto Heaven magic treasure. When Lu Ping arrived at the Jade Cave Sky Grotto, he saw a cultivator guarding the Jade Cave Sky Grotto from afar. Seeing this person's appearance, Lu Ping's brows furrowed. Lu Ping had seen this person before. When he and Tian Qin Laozu returned from Jingjia Island, Tian Qin Laozu took the opportunity to attack the third-generation disciple. At that time, 6 late-core forging cultivators came forward to stop him. This person was one of the 6. Lu Ping still remembered this person's name. He was a second-generation disciple. At that time, Lu Ping was standing behind Tian Qin Laozu. "I'm Lu Xianping from Chonghua sect. Greetings, Martial Uncle Xianshui. I'm under the order of the sect master to go to the Jade Cave Grotto Heaven. I hope Martial Uncle can approve it." Lu Ping was the first to step forward and bow. He didn't know if the other party knew him or if they would take the opportunity to make things difficult for him. However, he had to be courteous and not give the other party a chance or reason to make things difficult for him. A disciple of Chonghua. Senior sister Tian Ling's disciple. When did she accept a male disciple? Do you have a space token? Xianshui sage frowned and scrutinized Lu Ping. His eyes were clearly saying, "Boy, you're not an imposter, are you?" Lu Ping knew that today's matter might have some twists and turns, but he still handed over the token. Xianshui sage took a look at the token and immediately snorted coldly. "How dare you? Our sect has clearly stipulated that the use of a space token must have the mark of at least 3 Laozu. This means that the opening of the Grotto Heaven must be approved by at least 3 Laozu. Your space token only has the mark of Senior Sister Tian Ling. How can you enter the Jade Cave Grotto Heaven?" Lu Ping sneered inwardly. Now that Jinling had appointed the sect master to be in charge of everything in the North Sea, who didn't know that? Yet, this person still followed the rules set by Jinling. Clearly, he was doing this on purpose. However, Lu Ping knew that he couldn't be impatient. After all, Xianshui sage was an elder. Even if he was rude and unreasonable, if Lu Ping contradicted him, Xianshui sage would be labeled as a disrespectful person. Even so, Lu Ping didn't greet him with a smile. Instead, he said indifferently, "Uncle Master, Master is now the sect master. Whether or not to open the Jade Cave Grotto Heaven is up to the sect master." Could it be that Uncle Master doesn't care about the decisions of the sect Laozu? Xianshui sage's expression changed. He naturally didn't have the right or ability to oppose the sect's decisions. Xianshui sage could only be considered average among the late core forging cultivators in Jinling. He didn't have the right to participate in Jinling's affairs. Even before Lu Ping advanced to the late core forging stage, he naturally didn't know Lu Ping's true status in Jinling. Lu Ping calmly glanced at a fake mountain outside the Jade Cave Grotto Heaven's gate behind Xianshui sage. If Uncle Master doesn't know the current rules of the sect, you can go to the Hall of the Disciplinary Elders first. Although Uncle Master Tianqin isn't on the mountain, her eldest disciple is. Senior Sister Xian Hui will explain the rules to Uncle Master. In Xianshui sage's eyes, Lu Ping's indifferent attitude clearly showed undisguised contempt. Xianshui sage was instantly enraged. How dare you, Junior? Do you think I'm someone you can teach a lesson to? Today, I'll teach you a lesson on behalf of Senior Sister Tianling. I'll let you know the meaning of seniority. As soon as Xianshui sage finished speaking, Xianshui sage grabbed the mist chi surrounding Tianling Mountain and turned it into a giant white hand. It slammed down on Lu Ping's head. Lu Ping could tell at a glance that Xianshui sage also cultivated a water attribute cultivation method. The giant hand was still made of mist chi, not water. It was clear that Xianshui sage hadn't used his full strength. However, Xianshui sage was only at the 8th stage of core forging. Even if he used his full strength, how could he deal with the current Lu Ping? However, Lu Ping was also very uncomfortable. He really wanted to give this Uncle Master a good beating and let him know who was in charge of Jinling now. But he knew that if he really did that, it would bring trouble to his teacher. It might even give scoundrels in the sect an excuse to attack his teacher. Although these little tricks wouldn't be able to shake his teacher's position in the sect, Jinling's rise wasn't just driven by the top cultivators, but also by the collective efforts of a large number of low-level cultivators. If some scoundrels were to confuse them and cause chaos among the low-level cultivators in Jinling, it would ultimately affect Jinling's grand plan. The white cloud hand had just reached the top of Lu Ping's head when Lu Ping casually waved his sleeves and activated the art of moving clouds and summoning rain. The white cloud hand immediately vanished into thin air. Xianshui sage was stunned for a moment, then his face turned red as if he had been greatly provoked. He pointed at Lu Ping and said, Good, evil creature, you still dare to fight back. Lu Ping's scattered luck aura condensed again. At the same time, more luck aura from a few thousand feet around him gathered, turning into clouds and water. Once again, the luck aura condensed into a giant hand and slapped down at Lu Ping. This time, Xianshui sage was more or less serious. Lu Ping had just casually broken his spell, causing this second-generation disciple to feel as if he had suffered a great humiliation. This time, he really couldn't find a way out. Lu Ping looked at the giant sailor that was reaching for him and sighed helplessly. This time, he finally raised his hands, but in the end, he only made a simple hand seal and flicked his hands outwards. The sailor immediately collapsed. This time, Lu Ping used the art of water manipulation. You! Xianshui Jinren pointed a finger at Lu Ping. Looking at Lu Ping's solemn expression, he suddenly remembered that not only was he the one who launched the first 2 attacks, but Lu Ping was also the one who neutralized the attacks without retaliating. Xianshui Jinren hesitated for a moment before he blurted out, Impudent. Impudent? What a joke. Do you think I'll just stand there and let you do whatever you want? Lu Ping's face was expressionless. He only looked at Xianshui sage and let him attack again. Xianshui sage was able to push his cultivation to the 8th layer of the core forging realm. At this time, he naturally knew that he was being used as a tool. However, he was now riding a tiger and couldn't back down. In the future, if word got out that he, a second-generation disciple with a cultivation of the 8th layer of the core forging realm, couldn't do anything to a third-generation disciple, how would he have the face-to-face Jinling? The corner of Xianshui sage's eyes twitched. He opened his mouth and spat out a blue pearl. At the same time, a kettle jumped out from his core space. The kettle tilted downwards, and a clear stream of water flowed down from the spout. When the water reached the ground, it didn't splash. Instead, it seemed to pour into an invisible mold. As the water rose, it gradually formed a pair of large feet, then a pair of hairy thighs, and finally a huge head. Lu Ping's eyes narrowed. This was actually a 3-foot water ape. Xianshui Sage slapped the blue pearl directly into the water ape's heart. The huge water ape roared at the sky, its 2 huge forelimbs beating its sturdy chest. Then, as Xianshui Sage pointed at Lu Ping, the water ape's watery eyes suddenly shot out a sparkling light towards Lu Ping. There seemed to be a hint of fierceness in the light. Mystical ape water manipulation. This Xianshui Sage had actually practiced the first true technique of Jinling, the mystical ape water manipulation. Celestial Elephant Laozu had practiced this technique. When Celestial Elephant Laozu had passed the mid-dharma stage, the power of the mystical ape water manipulation was still vivid in Lu Ping's mind. The water ape leaped towards Lu Ping. Lu Ping suddenly felt as if all the water vapor around him had been controlled, no longer listening to Lu Ping's commands. The mystical ape water manipulation was indeed worthy of its name. Its control over water had indeed reached an extremely high level. However, to control all the water vapor in the area of combat, it also depended on who was using the mystical ape water manipulation. For a moment, Lu Ping's competitive spirit was aroused. Since the mystical ape water manipulation was known as the first true technique of Jinling, how would the mysterious North Sea wave listening technique that he had practiced compare to it? Of the 12 orthodox techniques of the North Sea, Lu Ping merely used the mystical ape water manipulation. Under Xianshui Sage's incredulous gaze, the water vapor that had been confined in the surroundings immediately broke free from the water ape's control and slowly gathered in front of Lu Ping. A small, strange dragon with 4 legs, fish whiskers, fish tail, deer antlers, and ox ears was at first only the length of a thin rope, but gradually grew to a length of 3 feet and a width of 3 feet. The strange dragon let out a long, provocative cry towards the water ape and flew towards it. Chapter 615. Just as the flood dragon was about to collide with the water ape, it suddenly turned around in midair and swung its tail. Pa! The water ape's waist was whipped by the flood dragon's tail, causing water to splash everywhere. The water ape roared and swiped its claws forward. The water flood dragon tried its best to dodge, but was still caught by one of its claws and half of its tail was torn off. Lu Ping frowned. He didn't expect Xianshui Immortal's water ape to be so solid. Its power was obviously greater than the water flood dragon formed by Lu Ping's water manipulation incantation. But when he saw the blue light flashing in the water ape's chest, realization dawned on him. Lu Ping formed a hand seal and flicked his fingers. The golden scale sword turned into a golden light and shot into the water ape's body. Before Xianshui Immortal could feel proud of his counterattack, he saw Lu Ping's water flood dragon suddenly emit dense sword qi. The blue water flood dragon suddenly seemed to be covered with a layer of golden scales. Green flood dragon sea disturbance incantation. Before Xianshui Immortal could react, the golden flood dragon regrouped and rammed its head through the water ape's abdomen. Before the water ape could react, it bit off the ape's left arm. Xianshui Immortal was furious. The water ape's right arm grabbed at the flood dragon's tail again, but the flood dragon whipped its tail again and smashed the ape's palm into splashes of water. Xianshui Immortal's face turned pale. He hurriedly retreated, but the flood dragon opened its mouth and spat at the water ape. A stream of golden water turned into 1,296 sword lights and flew toward the water ape. Xianshui Immortal couldn't care less about the water ape anymore. He reached out to recall the blue pearl from the ape's body, then turned into a ray of water light and fled to the side. But after Lu Ping's sword lights turned the water ape into a pool of water, he didn't know if it was intentional or not, but a ray of sword light went straight behind the water ape, toward a rockery next to the entrance of the Jade Cave Paradise. There was a cry of surprise from behind the rockery, and a ray of light that looked like protective upstanding chi rose up. Unexpectedly, after the sword light shredded the rockery into pieces, it seemed to have been summoned. It turned around and was sucked back into the belly of the water dragon, leaving only a cultivator standing there awkwardly with his protective aura. The water flood dragon turned back into a cloud of mist and dissipated. A golden flying sword was summoned back into Lu Ping's hand and disappeared in a flash. Lu Ping looked at the person behind the fake mountain and said, "Senior Marshal Uncle Xian Yun, since you've been here for a long time, why did you hide behind the fake mountain and not come out?" Uncle Master Xian Shui is ignorant and doesn't respect the sect master's orders. Uncle Master Xian Yun is the first-generation disciple of our sect. What do you think of this? After being hit by Lu Ping's flying sword, Daoist Xian Yun's face turned green and red. He didn't know whether to be angry, laugh, fear, or endure. He didn't know how to answer Lu Ping's question. At this moment, Daoist Xian Shui returned to the entrance of the Jade Cave Paradise and kept a distance from Lu Ping. He turned to look at Daoist Xian Yun and suddenly smiled coldly. "Uncle Master, it's fine that you used me as a tool today, but why did you hide behind this rockery and not help me when I was defeated? And it seems that you've been hiding behind this rockery for a long time, right?" Daoist Xian Yun's face turned red. Old man, after talking for a long time, he still couldn't find any reason. Lu Ping looked at their expressions and said with a smile, "Since the two of you still have things to discuss, then disciple won't disturb you. I believe that Uncle Master Xian Shui already knows the rules of our sect. Disciple will enter the Jade Cave Paradise first." With that, Lu Ping walked to the entrance of the Jade Cave Paradise as if there was no one else around. The space token in Lu Ping's hand slowly rose up. Then, a door opened in the Jade Cave Paradise and the token disappeared. Lu Ping turned to look at the two. Daoist Xian Shui and Daoist Xian Yun watched Lu Ping disappear into the Jade Cave Paradise with complicated expressions on their faces. However, at this time, Lu Ping was too lazy to care about the dirty things between the two. Daoist Xian Yun was a first-generation practitioner in Jinling. There were a few first-generation disciples like him in Jinling who had no hope of advancing to the late core forging stage. When Jinling was still a Dharma adept, most of the Dharma adepts spent their time on training. Other than important matters of the sect, other trivial matters of the sect were handled by the supervising disciples. These first-generation practitioners who could not advance to the Dharma stage were not willing to neglect their peers because of their seniority and status. In addition, the first-generation Laozu who had advanced to the Dharma stage did not want to neglect their peers. Therefore, many things in Jinling were controlled by them. Due to the stagnation in their cultivation base, these first-generation cultivators were more concerned about external matters. They put all their energy into the construction of their families, the training of their disciples, or simply indulged in the power in their hands. All of these made these cultivators unable to relinquish the power in their hands. These years, Jinling had risen strongly in the North Sea. In addition, the Laozu's long-term plan for Jinling had been to centralize the power and set up a leader. This decision was undoubtedly a bolt out of the blue for the first-generation cultivators and some of the second-generation cultivators who weren't able to achieve their ambitions. Originally, their training had been stagnant, but now they could not even keep the slightest bit of power in their hands. After decades or even centuries of indulgence, they had long been unable to relinquish the power in their hands. Some of them even used their power for personal gain, causing a huge deficit in Jinling's training resources. These people could not openly resist the strong decisions of the Laozus, so they could only do some small things in the dark. At the same time, they put on a layer of conservative clothing, using the excuse of opposing the setting up of a leader and breaking the rules of Jinling that had been passed down for tens of thousands of years. In reality, they were against the centralization of power and were unwilling to give up the power in their hands. However, in the eyes of Lu Ping, these people were nothing more than clowns. In the face of absolute power, what these practitioners did was nothing more than a mantis trying to stop a chariot. The reason why Master had not made a move until now was because he was worried about the first-generation Laozu's old friendship. Moreover, these first-generation practitioners were already 600 years old. If they could not break through to the Dharma manifestation stage, how many more years did they have to live? However, this time, Xianshui Zhenren and Xianyun Zhenren openly despised the authority of the leader and blocked Lu Ping outside the Jade Cave Grotto. This could not be justified. The battle between the two certainly could not be hidden from those who had the intention. Lu Tianling and Laozu were probably at the end of their patience now. He believed that after he went out, Zhenling would have a new scene. Thinking of this, Lu Ping's heart skipped a beat. He could not help but smile. It seemed that he was still a chess piece. At this time, none of the 6 first-generation Laozu of Zhenling were on Tianling Mountain. Only Master and Uncle Guo Tianshan were left to guard the sect. This was also giving Master a chance to reorganize the sect. Otherwise, if these first-generation practitioners caused trouble in front of Tianxiang Laozu and the others, it would not be good for Laozu to say anything, and Master would not look good either. Therefore, they all went to Frost Island, leaving only Tiankang Laozu at Huan Island. This time, when he entered the Jade Cave Grotto, how could Master not know that Xianshui Zhenren was guarding the place of inheritance? However, he did not give any hints or blessings beforehand. Who would dare to say that he was not a bait that Master deliberately threw out to make a fuss? Lu Ping walked quickly through the Jade Cave Grotto. This time, Lu Ping would only be in the Jade Cave Grotto for 7 days. Master had also made it clear that he was only to find 2 things. One was a water attribute worldly treasure that could refine stellar energy, and the other was a spirit-nourishing treasure left behind by Xuanqin's spiritual master, Lu Ping's grandmaster, who had passed away in meditation after his lifespan had come to an end. It was the Cloudlight 5 Elements robe. After Lu Ping had advanced to the late stage of core forging, he could already refine the 7th layer of protective stellar energy. Originally, when Lu Ping was choosing worldly treasures from Tian Fan Laozu on Frost Island, he had the idea of looking for water attribute worldly treasures for himself. However, at this time, if Lu Ping wanted to improve his protective stellar energy, not only would he need a large number of worldly treasures, but the quality of the worldly treasures would also be much higher. The batch of worldly treasures that Tian Fan Laozu had found could not meet Lu Ping's needs, be it in terms of quality or quantity. The space in the Jade Cave Grotto was much vaster than the space in Zhenling's place of inheritance that Lu Ping had been to before. Moreover, it looked more like a world. As for the location of the treasures in the Jade Cave Grotto, not even Tian's spirit Laozu knew. It could only give him a few rough locations. However, Tian's spirit Laozu knew the location of the Cloudlight 5 Elemental robe. Lu Ping thought about it. Finding a worldly treasure depended on luck. Moreover, even if he found it, it might not be useful. So, he went to see if the Cloudlight 5 Elemental robe was still there. In a hidden corner of the Jade Cave Grotto, Lu Ping's eyes flashed with blue light. Then, his hands formed several hand seals that Lu Tianling Laozu had passed down to him. A wave of true energy surged into the hand seals, and a spiritual aura flashed in the corner. The scenery in front of him was like a cracked painting, revealing a cave behind it. However, before Lu Ping could enter the cave, a 5-colored cloud had already floated out of the cave and fled into the distance. Once a treasure reached the level of a spirit-connected treasure, it would have a certain amount of spirituality. It could help the cultivator unleash the treasure's greatest power. Once a treasure reached the level of a spirit-nurturing treasure, it would have some spiritual judgment and would know how to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. The Cloudlight 5 Elemental robe was Sage Xian Xian's proudest spirit-nurturing treasure. There were 8 enchantments inside it. In order to refine this treasure, Sage Xian Xian had wasted a lot of time cultivating. In the end, he was only able to condense a 5th-grade golden core. He was unable to advance to the Dharma phase and could only die with regret. How could Lu Ping let go of a treasure that was already in his possession? Just as the five-colored cloud flew out of the cave, a ninth-grade white jade flower suddenly bloomed in Lu Ping's hand. A white light shot out from the flower and froze the five-colored cloud in midair. However, the cloud-light five-elemental robe was a spirit-nurturing treasure. Even though the ninth-grade white jade lotus was of high quality and was one of Lu Ping's personal treasures, it could only temporarily freeze the five-colored cloud for a moment. However, that moment was enough. After the five-colored cloud broke free from the ninth-grade white jade lotus, Lu Ping clasped his hands together. Countless watery lights and clouds gathered, wrapping the five-colored cloud into a huge cloud ball. Then, the cloud ball slowly shrank until it was in Lu Ping's hand. Chapter 6:16. Lu Ping frowned as he looked at the cloud-light five elements robe, which was wrapped in countless clouds. The reason why a spirit-nurturing treasure was called a spirit-nurturing treasure was because it recognized its master. If a cultivator couldn't obtain the recognition of a spirit-nurturing treasure, then no matter how high their cultivation base was, they wouldn't be able to display the treasure's full power. Of course, this was under the condition that the spirit-nurturing treasure was ownerless. If it was like the celestial phenomenon Laozu had given Lu Ping the boat, then there was no need to go through the process of recognizing a master. Although the cloud-light five elements robe was known as the five elements, when Taoist master Xian Xian crafted it, he had used water-attributed true essence as the foundation of the treasure. Otherwise, Lu Ping wouldn't have had the qualifications to make the treasure recognize him as its master. A treasure with 8 restrictions was in his hand. If it couldn't recognize him as its master at the last step, then Lu Ping would have suffered a great loss. Lu Ping looked at the treasure in his hand and couldn't help but hesitate. However, when he thought about how even his teacher couldn't obtain the cloud-light five elements robe's recognition, he felt relieved. If I don't, then I'm doomed. Lu Ping's hand suddenly emitted a rich bluish-purple light. The light quickly soaked into the cloud ball, dyeing it the same bluish-purple color. When Lu Ping observed celestial phenomenon Laozu's tribulation, he had gone through life and death to subdue a strand of pure yang qi that contained the pure yang fire of the thunder tribulation. After this strand of pure yang qi fused with Lu Ping's true essence, Lu Ping's blue true essence was gradually dyed with a trace of purple. After Lu Ping advanced to the late core forging realm, the trace of purple in his true essence greatly increased, causing Lu Ping's true essence to completely turn bluish purple. However, other than feeling that the true essence in his body was more vigorous than before, Lu Ping did not realize how much benefit the pure yang qi had brought him. At this moment, a dazzling five-colored light suddenly burst out from the bluish-purple cloud ball. Lu Ping was shocked at first, but then he was overjoyed. The five-colored cloud-light robe actually recognized him as its master so easily. Could this be the effect of the pure yang qi? Lu Ping suspiciously dispersed the outer cloud ball, and a five-colored cloud light appeared in Lu Ping's palm. However, compared to the inexplicable pure yang purple qi, Lu Ping was more willing to believe in the North Sea wave listening mantra that he cultivated and condensed unparalleled true essence. The true essence in Lu Ping's hand did not stop flowing out, and a steady stream of bluish-purple true essence poured into the palm-sized five-colored cloud ball. After all, it was a spirit-nurturing grade magic weapon, and its quality was even higher than the ocean-crossing boat. If it was an ordinary late-core forging cultivator, in a situation where the magic weapon recognized him as its master, he feared that he would not be able to completely activate the magic weapon without a day's worth of effort. However, Lu Ping only stood at the cave entrance for less than an hour. The five-colored cloud ball in Lu Ping's palm suddenly expanded, and then it surrounded the upper half of Lu Ping's body. When the five-colored cloud dissipated, Lu Ping's body was already covered in a simple blue gown. The multicolored cloud robe was not only a powerful defensive magic weapon, but it also had the dual effects of flight and concealment. Compared to the ocean-crossing boat, the multicolored cloud robe was far inferior in long-distance flight, but in a small area, the multicolored cloud robe was much more flexible than the ocean-crossing boat. Compared to Lu Ping's mysterious stone armor, the multicolored cloud robe could not perfectly conceal Lu Ping's aura like the stone armor, but it could hide Lu Ping's figure in the void without being seen by other cultivators. If the two could be combined, Lu Ping did not know who under the Transcendence stage would be able to see through Lu Ping's concealment. Of course, the multicolored cloud robe was first and foremost a defensive magic weapon. Although the water-controlling flag had a great reputation, it was after all broken and only condensed 6 treasures. At least for now, it was far from being comparable to the multicolored cloud robe. As for the rank 9 white jade lotus, it was even worse. As Lu Ping's magic weapon, the rank 9 white jade lotus had condensed 5 treasures, and it was only a spirit-level magic weapon. At the same time, it was also the life gentian formation. However, the rank 9 white jade lotus's quality was still there, and there was still room for improvement in the future. The multicolored cloud robe could condense 8 treasures, and it had already reached the limit of its growth. Although Lu Ping, who had obtained the multicolored cloud robe, had activated this spirit-nurturing magic weapon, but to really be proficient in using it, Lu Ping still needed to spend a long time to cultivate it. Lu Ping's mind moved, and the multicolored cloud robe was kept into the core space by Lu Ping. The multicolored cloud robe turned into a group of multicolored clouds in the core space, and went straight past the Na Chuan cauldron and occupied the orbit of the 7 treasures thunder calabash revolving around the golden elixir. The 7 treasures thunder calabash and the 7 treasures thunder calabash revolved around the golden elixir. When the multicolored cloud robe descended, the mouth of the 7 treasures thunder calabash suddenly spat out a group of thunder light. Perhaps it felt that the power of the multicolored cloud robe was great. The 7 treasures thunder calabash hesitated for a moment, and then the thunder light disappeared into the mouth of the calabash. At this time, Lu Ping had already strode towards the nearest of the few places that the teacher had provided to store the water attribute strange objects. Looking at the water ball floating in the air, Lu Ping shook his head with some regret. This strange object had obviously been smelted by someone, and the smelter had extracted the most essence of this water ball. The rest, whether in terms of quantity or quality, was not enough for Lu Ping to smelt the 7th layer of Gang Qi. Lu Ping turned around and walked to the next location. Looking at the Kuei water essence in the middle of a pond, Lu Ping sighed helplessly. His protective aura had long been condensed into such a miraculous item. There were too few strange objects in the 3rd place, and there was nothing at all in the 4th place. At this time, 4 days had passed. If he still couldn't find it today, then even if Lu Ping found a suitable strange object in the future, with the amount of his Gang Qi needed, he wouldn't be able to smelt it in the remaining time. At that time, Lu Ping would be teleported out of the Jade Cave Grotto by the space token. There were 2 very strange rules in the Jade Cave Grotto. One was that cultivators were not allowed to fly in it, and the second was that other than magic treasures and magic tools, other spiritual objects and strange objects were not allowed to be brought out of the grotto unless the cultivator directly refined and fused them. In the past few days, Lu Ping had found a lot of magic treasures, spiritual materials, spiritual objects, strange objects, medicinal pills, inheritance, and so on along the way. There were many things that even the current Lu Ping was quite envious of. It could be seen that the foundation that Jinling had accumulated for tens of thousands of years might not be as good as Xian Ling's sect as the outside world had guessed. Come to think of it, if Jinling's foundation was really not as good as Xian Ling's sects, how could Jinling have risen so quickly over the years? However, these things were all imprisoned by layers of restrictions. Once Lu Ping opened these restrictions and obtained one of the treasures, the space token would automatically teleport Lu Ping out of the Jade Cave Grotto. Lu Ping hurriedly walked towards the 5th place mentioned by his teacher. Time was getting tight. If he couldn't find a suitable strange object, Lu Ping would have to give up this rare opportunity. Seeing that he was already halfway to the next place, Lu Ping's footsteps suddenly stopped. Activating the 3 pure true pupils, Lu Ping's eyes flashed with green light as he looked at a vertical waterfall in front of him. After thinking for a moment, Lu Ping turned and walked in the direction of the waterfall. Standing next to the pool formed by the impact of the waterfall, Lu Ping's eyes were still flashing with green light, and his expression was a little uncertain. After a while, Lu Ping seemed to have finally made up his mind. He raised his hands towards the pool, and the water in the entire pool actually flowed up along with Lu Ping's palms. In just an instant, the water in the pool had been raised by 2/3 by Lu Ping. Lu Ping reached out his hand towards the pool, which was already 2/3 deep, and a ball of green light jumped out of the pool and was caught by Lu Ping's hand. However, just as Lu Ping grabbed the ball of water, Lu Ping turned to look at the waterfall that was also being pulled up. He let out a "ah," and there was a trace of surprise in his voice. He raised his hand again, and the waterfall that was previously half rolled up suddenly flowed up even higher, and a stone wall appeared behind the waterfall. Lu Ping slowly pressed towards this stone wall, and with a bang, the stone wall opened up to a cave of 1 foot in size. The surface of the cave was covered by a spiritual net formed by a layer of restriction. Lu Ping's divine thought swept across the spiritual net, and at the same time, his eyes flashed with green light. Then he made a few gestures with his hands and raised them towards the spiritual net. A bluish-purple light suddenly integrated into the spiritual net. When the grayish-white spiritual net completely turned bluish-purple, the spiritual net cracked from the middle. Lu Ping hooked his right index finger toward the cracked crack, and a pitch-black liquid gushed out of the crack, forming a black water ball in front of Lu Ping. The water ball grew larger and larger until it reached a diameter of 2 feet, and the pitch-black liquid in the stone wall stopped gushing. Lu Ping looked at the small cyan water ball, and then looked at the large black water ball, and muttered to himself, "Flowing green jade sedimentation liquid, black marrow stone liquid, 2 strange things appeared at once. Which one is necessary now? Which one should I choose?" Flowing green jade sedimentation liquid could be used as the 5th water attribute strange thing to smelt the magical power of 3 pure true pupils. The black marrow stone liquid was the ideal strange thing for Lu Ping to smelt the 7th layer of protective aura qi. Lu Ping originally found the trace of flowing green jade sedimentation liquid, thinking that even if he went to the next place, he might not be able to find a suitable strange thing to smelt the protective aura qi, so it was better to choose the flowing green jade sedimentation liquid. At least it could improve the 3 pure true pupils. Unexpectedly, good things always come in pairs. When Lu Ping got the flowing green jade sedimentation liquid, he accidentally found that there was a restriction in the stone wall behind the waterfall. He did not expect that after opening the restriction, he would get the flowing green jade sedimentation liquid, which was known as stone water, and it was a water attribute strange thing that could be used to smelt the 7th layer of protective aura qi. This made Lu Ping a little difficult to choose. Should he choose the black marrow stone liquid or the flowing green jade sedimentation liquid, or both? Chapter 617. Lu Ping wanted to choose both, but no matter which one Lu Ping fused with first, Lu Ping would be teleported out by the space token after the fusion, so he naturally wouldn't have a chance to fuse with the other one. Fuse together. This was a good idea, but if the two were to be fused at the same time, not to mention that there might be mistakes in the middle, even if everything went well, it would be impossible to fuse the two completely in 3 days. At that time, when the space token opened, he would still fall short of success. After weighing the pros and cons for a long time, Lu Ping finally put the flowing green jade sedimentation liquid back into the pool, and began to concentrate on smelting the liquid of the black essence stone. 3 days was actually only enough for Lu Ping to barely liquefy the black essence stone into his protective aura. To really form a protective aura shield, it would take at least half a year or even more than a year of nurturing and tempering. The 9th rank white jade lotus bloomed under Lu Ping's feet, and layers of protective aura shield also bloomed around Lu Ping's body at the same time as the lotus bloomed. A wisp of the black essence stone liquid was absorbed by Lu Ping's true essence and began to slowly melt into the 6th layer of aura shield. Before he could carefully polish it, he also absorbed the 2nd wisp of black essence liquid. Unexpectedly, at this time, the 7 treasure thunder calabash in the core space began to jump rapidly again, wanting to rush out of the core space. Obviously, it also wanted to swallow the black essence liquid. Lu Ping had already begun to absorb and refine the black essence liquid, so he naturally wouldn't let the 7 treasure thunder calabash come out at this time to make trouble. The surface of the golden core suddenly shone with a golden light, and the white jade lotus under the golden core shot out a white light, firmly locking the 7 treasure thunder calabash in the core space. Lu Ping didn't have time to think about the difference between the black marrow stone liquid and ordinary mystical items, and why it would attract the Thunder Gourd's interest. All he could do was speed up the process of refining the black marrow stone liquid into his protective aura. When the black marrow stone in the protective aura reached its saturation state, Lu Ping finally stopped. At this time, the black marrow stone in front of him was only half a foot in size. It was far from enough for Lu Ping to feed the Thunder Gourd. Lu Ping took out a jade bottle from his storage ring and put the rest of the black marrow fluid into it. A spatial door suddenly appeared above Lu Ping, and Lu Ping felt his body lighten. When he reappeared, he was already at the entrance of the Jade Cave Paradise. Lu Ping stared blankly at the person in front of him. He couldn't help but sigh at how fast his teacher was. When I have nothing to do, I can use it to cultivate. When he saw his teacher again, Lu Tianling Laozu was talking to Guo Tianshan Laozu in the True Spirit Palace. After seeing his teacher, Lu Tianling Laozu said with a smile, "How did the trip to the Jade Cave go?" Lu Ping patted his chest, and a colorful cloud appeared in Lu Ping's hand. He smiled and said, "Disciple was lucky to not fail." Lu Tianling Laozu summoned the colorful cloud in front of him and carefully observed it for a long time. He looked quite sad and said after a long time, "This magic treasure was your grandmaster's favorite. You must treat it well. In the future, it will be the inheritance of my Zhonghua sect. It will be used to protect the future disciples." Lu Ping nodded solemnly. He took the colorful cloud and put it back into his core space to nurture. Seeing that Lu Ping had not left, Lu Tianling Laozu asked, "Is there anything else?" Lu Ping scratched his head and chuckled. He roughly told him what happened in the Jade Cave Grotto Heaven. In the end, he said, "The flowing green jade liquid is quite useful for one of my abilities. Disciple sincerely requests the sect to grant this item to disciple. I am willing to exchange some treasures for it." Guo Tianshan Laozu had been looking at Lu Ping with a smile since he came in. When he heard Lu Ping's request, he could not help but chuckle. Lu Ping did not know what Guo Tianshan Laozu meant. Just as he was about to look at Guo Tianshan Laozu, he heard his teacher snort and say, "What exchange? You are now one of the best high-grade cultivators in the sect. What's the big deal about making a request to the sect? The flowing green jade liquid is not a treasure that can be used as a last resort. Since you need it, just take it." At this time, Guo Tianshan Laozu also laughed and said, "Boy, I think you are afraid of being blackmailed by Master Tianlu. You don't know that the pill pavilion looks good on the surface, but it is difficult on the inside. The consumption of all kinds of spirit herbs is quite large, and our sect does not have enough alchemists. Inside and outside, it is mostly managed by Tianlu Laozu alone. That's why it seems like he is haggling over every little thing. In addition, you have always been rich, so Tianlu Laozu always wants to exchange some good things from you. Now our sect's shortage of spirit herbs has been greatly alleviated. You are also our sect's third alchemist grandmaster. Your status in our sect is not below Fa Xiang Laozu. So what if you ask for 1 or 2 treasures from the sect? Even if you don't ask, hasn't the sect been sending you benefits all these years?" Lu Ping was at a loss after hearing Guo Tianshan Laozu's words. Only now did he remember that ever since he advanced to the late core forging stage, Tian Xiang Laozu had rewarded him with a spirit-nourishing magic treasure, the ocean crossing boat. Then, his teacher opened the Jade Cave Heavenly Abode for him to retrieve the cloud-light multicolored robe and the black essence stone. Then, there was the batch of heaven and earth spiritual treasures that Tian Fan Laozu found on the Frost Island. Lu Ping took away nearly half of the things in one go, and Tian Fan Laozu did not say anything. Obviously, with Lu Ping's current status, he already had the qualifications to make the sect lean towards him and rope him in. Tian Ling Laozu glanced at Lu Ping, then said to Gua Tian Shan Laozu, "Junior brother Gua, why are you saying all this? It's a waste of this kid's arrogance. Right now, he's in the limelight. Not only did he kill Shui Wuhuan, he even dared to make fun of our sect's second-generation disciple. If his cultivation was a little higher, wouldn't he go against the heavens?" After asking Lu Ping about the location of the flowing green jade liquid in the Jade Cave Heavenly Abode, Tian Ling Laozu instructed Lu Ping to wait for a day on Heavenly Spirit Mountain, and there would be news on the second day. After leaving the True Spirit Hall, Lu Ping thought for a moment. However, he did not return to his cave abode on Heavenly Spirit Mountain. Instead, he turned around and went to the puppet hall. Ever since he was easily defeated by Ouyang Weijian last time, Ji Xianxian had become a little obsessed. He locked himself in the cultivation room all day and did not cultivate. No one knew what he was vexed about. When Lu Ping saw him again, he was simply shocked. One of the two heroes of Xinling, who had always been graceful, optimistic, and humorous, was now slovenly and unshaven. Lu Ping carefully asked, "Junior brother Ji, have you gone berserk?" When Ji Xianxian raised his head and saw that it was Lu Ping, he immediately rolled his eyes and said, "I've already become like this, and as a good friend, you still have the mood to take pleasure in my misfortune. You're really careless in making friends." Seeing that he was fine, Lu Ping smiled and said, "Come on, do you think I don't know you? What exactly is going on? Tell me." Ji Xianxian sighed and told Lu Ping about what Master Daoist Xuanhuai and Ouyang Weijian had said during the battle. In the end, he said, "Do you think I've really gone down the wrong path? Do I really have to give up making puppets and focus on the cultivation of various magical powers and spells like you? But making puppets is really my greatest pleasure and advantage. If I focus on the cultivation of magical powers and spells, my final achievements will probably be inferior to the ordinary disciples of the sect. Sigh, once junior brother Xianchu leaves, if I fade into the crowd, the title of the two heroes of the third-generation disciples will really be a joke." Lu Ping thought for a moment and said, "Do you know about avatars?" Ji Xianxian looked strangely at Lu Ping and said, "Which person who cultivates in the art of puppetry doesn't know about avatars? But avatars can only be made after a cultivator has advanced to the Dharma phase. Furthermore, our sect does not have the complete inheritance of avatars. Even if I advance to the Dharma phase in the future, I may not be able to make avatars." "Oh?" Lu Ping asked in surprise, "So our sect actually has a partial inheritance of avatars?" Chapter 618. Ji Xianxian said proudly, "Of course there is, it's just that it's not complete. Do you still remember the gift we presented to teacher when we attended the Master's Apprenticeship Hall?" Lu Ping suddenly realized something and said, "I remember that you presented a jade scroll regarding the creation of puppets." Martial Uncle Xian Huai seemed to be very happy at the time. Could it be that the jade scroll contained the creation method of an avatar? Xian Huai's eyes lit up. Ji Xianxian said, "Exactly. Unfortunately, the records within it aren't complete. Teacher has exhausted all his efforts in these past few years in order to perfect this external avatar technique, and it's even to the extent that he's delayed his own cultivation for this. Unfortunately, even though this incomplete refinement technique has allowed the standard of my puppet pavilion to rise greatly, it's still far from being able to refine a true external avatar." Lu Ping thought for a moment and said, "If you have that external avatar technique, can it make up for your current situation?" Ji Xuanchuan's spirit rose as he said, "Of course. Right now, my cultivation just happened to fall into the fault line of my sect's puppet creation technique. I don't have enough low-level puppets, and I can't use high-level puppets. If I have a true identity avatar technique, I will definitely be able to figure out the most suitable puppet creation technique through it. This way, I can't say that my strength is better than Ouyang Weijian's, but I won't be easily defeated by him like those people on Frost Island. At the mention of puppet creation, Ji Xuanxuan's face immediately glowed. He was originally a genius that only appeared once in 1,000 years in the puppet pavilion, but this genius wasn't because of his cultivation, but because of his talent in puppet creation. However, because of the limitations of Jinling's puppet creation technique, he had no choice but to become mediocre. After speaking for a long time, Ji Xianxian looked at Lu Ping suspiciously and said, "You've been talking for a long time. Could it be that you have an identity avatar technique?" Ji Xianxian knew that this old friend in front of him was extremely powerful. If it was someone else, he naturally wouldn't think of it as an external avatar. Only Lu Ping, Ji Xianxian knew that he definitely wouldn't speak without thinking. Lu Ping nodded. "You really have it?" Ji Xianxian was still a little worried. Although there was doubt on his face, his eyes were already burning with the flames of hope. Lu Ping stretched out his hand and threw a purple jade slip into his hand. Ji Xianxian took the jade slip, and without saying a word, he poured all of his spiritual will into the jade slip. When he first obtained the inheritance of the Longhuai ancestors' doppelganger technique in the Fallen Ruins, Lu Ping had also carefully read the contents inside. Even though he wasn't proficient in the refinement of puppets, so he was even more helpless when it came to higher-level external avatars, he had a good friend like Ji Xianxian, and under his influence, he had a good understanding of puppet refinement and external avatars. But when Lu Ping looked at the external avatar technique of the Longhuai ancestor, only then did he realize how shallow his knowledge was. The external avatar technique was extensive and profound. Everyone in the cultivation world knew that the external avatar technique was the highest realm of puppet refinement, but they didn't know that the external avatar technique itself was an enormous cultivation system, and it was divided into many different stages, realms, and uses of the external avatar technique. The jade slip that Lu Ping took out was only the most basic part of the identity avatar technique. However, in Ji Xuanxuan's opinion, this basic part was an extremely complete and profound inheritance of the external avatar technique. Ji Xianxian quickly skimmed through the contents, then looked up to the sky and exhaled. He closed his eyes, as if he was savoring the contents inside. After a long time, he opened his eyes, revealing boundless fanaticism, and said, "Senior brother Lu, where did you get this complete external avatar technique from?" "I'm suddenly enlightened." Lu Ping smiled and said, "You don't have to worry about where I got it from. I only want to ask you if this inheritance is real, and if it's complete." Ji Xianxian nodded solemnly and said, "It's absolutely true. There's no mistake this time. The strength of our sex puppet pavilion will definitely increase greatly." "All right." Lu Ping smiled and said, "I only have 2 requests. First, only the 2 of us know about today's matter. The sect is asking you about the origin of the complete external avatar technique. You have to justify yourself and don't drag me into it. Second, when I advance to the Dharma manifestation stage in the future, you have to do your best to refine an external avatar of the highest quality for me. You can't hide anything from me." Ji Xianxian solemnly vowed and patted his chest, saying, "If you spoke like this on any other day, I would have already fallen out with you. However, this inheritance is of great importance, so I naturally have an excuse. Don't worry, I definitely won't drag you into it." Lu Ping had divided Longhuai's avatar inheritance into 3 grades. The one he gave to Ji Xianxian was merely the most basic part of the lower grade. However, even with the lowest grade of avatar inheritance, it was unknown how great of a wave it would bring to Jinling's sect. The next day, Lu Ping prepared to go to the True Spirit Hall to bid farewell to his teacher and return to Huangli Island. He also wanted to obtain the flowing green jade sedimentary fluid. Unexpectedly, before Lu Ping could reach the True Spirit Hall, he saw perfected Xianchen hurriedly walking over from the other side. His eyes lit up when he saw Lu Ping. "Ha, Uncle Master, where are you going?" Although perfected Xianchen was a second-generation disciple, he was still close to the disciples of the Three Lands. The more casual Lu Ping was with him, the more familiar he was with him. It's all because of you. Yesterday, senior sister Tian Ling asked me to make a trip to the Jade Cave Paradise and brought this for you. As he spoke, perfected Xianchen tossed a jade bottle to Lu Ping. Lu Ping opened it and saw that it was the flowing green jade sedimentary fluid. Lu Ping said happily, "Sorry to trouble you, Uncle Master." Perfected Xianchen waved his hand and said, "It's no trouble at all. Although I'm now the guardian of the Jade Cave Grotto Heaven, I've never entered the famous second inheritance ground of our sect even once. This time, thanks to you, I've been able to go in and broaden my horizons." After bidding farewell to perfected Xianchen, Lu Ping thought for a moment. He did not go to the True Spirit Hall again. Instead, he went to visit Guotian Shan Laozu. After coming out of Guotian Shan Laozu's cave abode, Lu Ping walked straight to the teleportation formation. It had been 2 days since he returned from Frost Island. He did not know if Uncle Master Xianchen and the others had found the exact location of the Ying Tian sect's training ground. He also did not know if Jiang Tianlin Laozu and the other sect's Laozu had begun to secretly infiltrate the Middle Earth. There was no teleportation formation leading to the Middle Earth in the North Sea. Therefore, these 10 Laozu and the late-stage core forging cultivators had to use the teleportation formation controlled by the sects of the East Sea to reach the Middle Earth. They had to move separately to avoid being discovered by the sects of the East Sea. After reaching the Middle Earth, Ying Tian's sect's training ground was located at the border between the Middle Earth and the North Ice Plains. Even if there were no obstacles along the way, it would take them at least 10 to 15 days to gather the people from the various sections. Thinking of this, Lu Ping became much more confident. If there were no accidents, he would probably reach the Middle Earth before Laozu. He might even find the training ground of the Ying Tian sect first. On Huangli Island, after Lu Ping returned, he first went with Hu Lili to pay a visit to Tian Qin Laozu, who had replaced Jiang Tianlin Laozu to guard Huangli Island. Lu Ping had already made up his mind to go to the Middle Earth. Although he was famous in the North Sea, Tian Qin Laozu was still a Dharma idol Laozu. Hu Lili had just started to break through to the mid-core forging realm. If someone really caused trouble on Huangli Island after Lu Ping left, Hu Lili might not be able to control the situation with her cultivation. At that time, Tian Qin Laozu might have to intervene. In the cave dwelling on Huangli Island, Hu Lili asked suspiciously, "Why did you expand the cave dwelling to such a large area?" Before they went to the Frost Island last time, Lu Ping had ordered Hu Lili to expand the cave dwelling. Although Hu Lili didn't know the reason, she still did as he said. Feeling the increasingly dense spirit energy in the cave dwelling, the main spirit vein on Huangli Island had gradually grown into a mid-sized spirit vein with the spirit-gathering pearl that Lu Ping had buried inside. Hearing Hu Lili's question, Lu Ping smiled and said, "Didn't you say that after the spirit vein becomes a mid-sized spirit vein, we need to use a special artifact to seal the spirit vein to prevent it from flowing away?" Hu Lili's eyes brightened and said, "You found it." Lu Ping nodded with a smile and said, "Actually, I didn't find it. I had an item in my possession a long time ago, and now it has come in handy." As he said this, Lu Ping flipped his palm, and the House of Gold grew continuously in his palm. Then, the door of the House of Gold opened wide, and a small palace actually flew out from inside. The palace grew in the wind until it was 9 meters long, 6 meters wide, and 10 meters tall. Only then did it slowly descend, right at the place where the 10 small spirit veins were gathered. There was a rumble, but it wasn't caused by the palace landing. Instead, the moment the palace landed, the 10 small spirit veins were quickly gathered together by the palace and became a complete mid-sized spirit vein, causing the earth to shake. Lu Ping looked at the towering palace and asked in surprise, "What is this?" Lu Ping smiled and said, "This is a spatial mystic instrument I found when I was exploring a senior ancestor's cave dwelling. This palace was used by that senior ancestor to suppress the spirit vein in the cave dwelling. After that, I kept the palace for myself. Initially, I wanted to place it on the small mountain next to the Golden House, but it's a waste to leave it there. So, I might as well place it here. If I can connect the island's protective array formation disk to this palace, it will serve as the core of the entire array formation. Then, the island's protective array formation's power will surely increase by another level. Hu Lily nodded and said, "That's right. I heard that a few years ago, Master created a new formation called the Mother and Child Traction Interlocking Formation. At that time, Master said with pride that with this formation, she would become a formation master. Unfortunately, my cultivation wasn't high enough at that time, and my control over formations was far from enough, so I didn't learn this formation. However, at that time, Master made it clear that if my cultivation reached the middle stage of core forging, she would teach me how to set up this formation." Hearing this, Lu Ping looked at Hu Lily with surprise. Chapter 619. After arranging everything on Huangli Island, he sent voice transmissions to several of his good friends, asking them to take care of Huangli Island while he was away. Then, he said to Hu Lily, "I've already discussed it with Martial Uncle Guo Tianshan. When you advance to the mid-stage core forging realm, you can invite him to Huangli Island to use the art of moving and filling the sea again to expand Huangli Island. Currently, Huangli Island has a circumference of 20 to 30 li, but it's still considered a small island. This time, we must expand it to a small island with a circumference of more than 50 li," Hu Lily asked worriedly. "Do you really have to go to the Central Plains?" Lu Ping smiled and said, "I'm really in a hurry this time. This time, I found an opportunity, but it's not just me. If I want to go to the Central Plains before others, I have to go to the Central Plains. Moreover, going to the Central Plains cultivation world has always been my wish. I want to go to that place that is said to represent the highest level of cultivation in the cultivation world. After all, the North Sea is still too small." Hu Lily sighed sadly and said, "It's a pity that I'm not strong enough. I can't help you much." "Why can't you help me?" Lu Ping said seriously, "Huangli Island is my foundation. It can even be said that it's a way out for myself. You've worked so hard to manage it all these years. This is a great help to me." Hu Lily was a shrewd person after all. A hint of sadness flashed through her eyes. She thought for a moment and said, "Don't forget about those two brats. That Wang Qi was sent to chop firewood at the back of Tianling Mountain. It said that he was tortured by Du Feng. Now, he's following Du Feng to hunt demonic beasts overseas. That Tian Yu, whom you placed in the Pill Pavilion, is said to be a talented fourth-generation alchemist. He is highly regarded by the Pill Pavilion's new alchemist, Master Xian Fang." Hu Lily paused for a moment before continuing, "There are also 5 other disciples who have seen you practice. I heard that their cultivations aren't low either. They have all advanced to the late blood condensation realm and were accepted by the Sex Core Forging realm's 3rd-generation disciples. They are considered the best among the 4th-generation disciples." When Hu Lily saw Lu Ping's nonchalant expression, she couldn't help but agitate him. "I see that all your hard work has gone to someone else. Forget about those 5 disciples, but that Wang Qi, junior brother Du Feng, has come to me several times to ask if you still want to accept him as your disciple. If you don't accept him, he will accept him. You should know that Wang Qi cultivates the metal element sword technique, which is very compatible with junior brother Du Feng's sword technique. Junior brother Du Feng is a man of few words, but he has asked me several times. It seems like he really wants to accept Wang Qi." Lu Ping replied nonchalantly, "Don't worry, senior brother Du won't accept him as a disciple. He's just trying to provoke me, just like you, to make me accept Wang Qi as a disciple as soon as possible." "Then why did you? Hee. Swordsmanship isn't something that can be learned by following seniors, and it can't be trained by killing beasts either. Why are sword cultivators known as the best in the cultivation world? It's because swordsmanship requires the most spirituality. How do you make your swordsmanship, flying swords, and divine arts linked to the spirit? What is the spirit of all living things in this world? These are all things that a true sword cultivator should consider. After all, the path of a sword cultivator has to rely on oneself to succeed. Lu Ping paused for a moment, then said, "Tell Wang Qi what I said, then ask him to go to the East Sea's Soundwave Island and find Qi Lianying. Tell him that I told him to come to the East Sea to train and practice his swordsmanship." Hu Lili blinked her eyes. Although she was not a sword cultivator, she had been with Lu Ping for a long time, so she had some understanding of swordsmanship. After a moment of hesitation, she asked, "You're not asking him to kill people, are you? Which sword cultivator doesn't kill people like flies?" Lu Ping paused for a moment, then said, "I just want to see if he can walk this path." "What about Tianyu? That kid has my token. Who in the entire Elixir Pavilion would dare to take him as a disciple? Who would dare to make things difficult for him?" After a pause, Lu Ping added, "Even the Fornax and Tianqin Laozu wouldn't dare." Although Hu Lili was surprised by Lu Ping's words, she did not know that her Dao companion was now the third alchemist in Jinling, so she continued, "But you really should take in a disciple or two." Previously, when junior brother Zhang Xuanqing visited Huangli Island, he would always bring Uncle Master Xuanyuan's message urging you to take in a disciple. Now, among the third-generation disciples in the sect, your cultivation is the highest, your strength is the most profound, and you are the most famous, but you don't have a single disciple. If this goes on for too long, I'm afraid Uncle Master Lu Tianling will also blame you." Lu Ping was stunned for a moment. Only then did he remember what his master said when he saw the cloudy light multicolored robe in the True Spirit Palace that day. Taking the cloudy light multicolored robe as the inheritance of Zhonghua lineage, to protect the future disciples. Wasn't this also hinting that he should take in a disciple to inherit his legacy? It seems that I really should take in a few disciples, but it's not that easy to become my disciple. Seeing that Lu Ping had this thought, Hu Lili no longer urged him, but instead said, "With your current identity and status, you naturally have to be very careful when taking in disciples." After saying goodbye to Hu Lili, who was standing in front of the cave residence to send him off, Lu Ping could not help but look back. With his magical vision, he could naturally see that Hu Lili was still looking at him from the entrance of the cave residence. Lu Ping sighed in his heart and thought to himself, "It seems that she's going to have a baby. It's not good to leave her alone to look after the house like this." Hundreds of miles below the sea surface outside of Huanyu Island, after the teleportation array incident with Aou, this place was occupied by the monster clan. Although the cultivators of the North Sea organized several attacks on the monster clan, and although the monster clan suffered heavy casualties, they still firmly occupied this area of the sea. The various sects of the North Sea also suspected that the monster clan had discovered some secret in this area, and there were even human Dharma adepts who sneaked in to investigate, but in the end, they found nothing. Although the various sects were puzzled, they could only send people to monitor and report immediately if anything happened. The Jade Water Moon Pearl, the Ocean Crossing Boat, the colorful Cloudlight Robe, the stone armor, and on top of that, Lu Ping's exquisite water-based cultivation method. If he wanted to sneak into the sea, even early Dharma adepts would find it difficult to find him. "Brother Zhang, do you know why we are stationed here? This place is so close to the human territory, and we are often attacked by the human race. Countless of our brothers have died, but we have never seen a mountain of gold or silver here." "Pfft, Brother Wu, you're really funny. Even if there is a mountain of gold or silver, you want it. That's just a common thing for mortals. What use do we have for it? I just don't understand. What do you think there is in this place? We are a lone army in deep waters, and every time we rely on the lives of our brothers to barely defend this part of the sea. I don't know who came up with such a bad idea. If I, Wu Shan, become Laozu, I will definitely have a talk with him." "You? Brother Wu, it's not that I want to discourage you, but the one who came up with this idea was Aou of the Ice Dragon clan. Let's not talk about whether you can become a Dharma adept. Even if you become Laozu, would you dare to find trouble with that guy Aou?" He has already condensed a high-level golden elixir, and it is said that he has already broken through to the Dharma stage. By the time you become a Dharma adept, he will probably have already passed the tribulation and reached the mid-Dharma stage. Even if he can't reach it, Brother Wu, at the same level, would you be a match for the Ice Dragon clan? What's so great about that? Aou still says that his clan is a top demon clan, but he is not alone. The Ice Dragon clan is about to be wiped out by him. Brother Wu, don't talk nonsense. Aou is now a popular person in front of all the Laozu, but it's just a suggestion from him, and we brothers are going to defend this part of the sea with our lives. Isn't that enough to explain the problem? Hey, speaking of which, you really don't know why we are guarding this place? Who knows? There are rumors that there are ancient relics hidden here, and the relics are about to be unearthed. There are also rumors that the Earth meridians here are special, and there may be a time when a large spiritual meridian will be born, and so on. In short, these rumors are everywhere. But as you can see, there are at least 2 Laozu leading us to guard this place. Although there are always changes, there are 2 Laozu, one in the mid-Dharma stage, and the other in the early Laozu stage. Isn't this enough to explain the problem? Behind the 2 patrolling core forging demon cultivators, an invisible stream of water flowed for a moment, then disappeared. Lu Ping avoided the eyes and ears of the demon clan guarding this area, and slowly approached the underwater mountain range where he had discovered the clear stream cave abode. Many years had passed, and although the cave at the entrance of the clear stream cave abode was well hidden, he didn't know if the demon clan had already discovered it. Lu Ping remembered that the demon clan had secretly set up camp here because he had helped Yin Xianchu escape the sex pursuit and wanted to use the clear stream cave abode's transportation formation to go to the Middle Lands. Unexpectedly, he ran into the demon clan's hiding place, and had no choice but to give up on the trip to the Middle Lands. He had thought that after the various sects of the North Sea discovered that the demon clan was stationed here, they would definitely sweep through the demon clan with lightning speed. This place was too close to Universe Island, and how could they allow outsiders to sleep next to their bed? Unexpectedly, after several years, the North Sea demon clan still firmly occupied this part of the sea. Aou was from the Ice Dragon clan, and the Ice Dragon clan had an inheritance pearl. Could there really be some secret buried here? Lu Ping had his suspicions, but now was not the time to think about such things in a dangerous place. After avoiding many patrolling demon clan cultivators along the way, Lu Ping finally arrived at the hidden cave where the clear stream cave abode was located. After investigating the waters around the cave, he discovered that there were no demon clan members nearby, and the mark he'd left behind was still there. This meant that the demon clan hadn't discovered this place yet. Lu Ping couldn't help but sigh in relief. However, Lu Ping still didn't dare to be careless. After opening up the huge rock outside the cave, he carefully put it back in its original place. Only then did Lu Ping continue slowly toward the cave abode. Chapter 620. Following the cavern tunnel, Lu Ping walked all the way to the spacious hall where they had found the underground abode all those years ago. Back then, before the underground abode was discovered, the protective formation of the Qingjian cave was still in operation, and the seawater was kept out of the hall. Now that the protective formation had collapsed, the entire Qingjian cave had been flooded by seawater. When Lu Ping had first arrived here, he had been puzzled as to why there were so many fragments of ritual implements in the hall. After receiving Qingjian Laozu's inheritance, he found out that Qingjian Laozu must have triggered the tribulation of the early Dharma stage when he was seriously injured. Only then did he suddenly realize that Qingjian Laozu had failed to pass the tribulation in the hall and his protective ritual implements had been destroyed by the lightning tribulation. It was only after Lu Ping had witnessed the process of Laozu's tribulation that he realized that practitioners could not rely on ritual implements to pass the tribulation. They could only rely on their own inner yuan, spells, powers, and physical strength to withstand the tribulation. Otherwise, it would interfere with the process of the tribulation and make things worse for the practitioner. Lu Ping then realized that the countless fragments of the ritual implements in the hall were not destroyed by the lightning tribulation. Instead, they were destroyed by the residual power of the lightning tribulation after Qingjian Laozu had failed to pass the tribulation. This was also the reason why Qingjian Laozu had given his storage implements and the few treasures that he had inherited from Zhenling to Lu Ping in advance when he thought that he would not be able to survive the last two lightning tribulations of the mid-Dharma stage. He was afraid that if Qingjian Laozu failed to pass the tribulation, not only would he die, but the items that he had brought with him would also be damaged by the residual power of the lightning tribulation. However, at this time, Lu Ping was not in a hurry to rush to the Qingjian cave through the underground tunnel of the hall. Instead, he was patrolling the hall in the middle of the mountain, as if looking for something. Since Patriarch Clearstream was a cultivator of the Yingtian sect, he was lucky enough to escape after the Yingtian sect was annihilated. He rushed to the North Sea to seek refuge with Fei Ling sect, but he didn't expect that Fei Ling sect would be annihilated almost at the same time. Helpless, he was invited by the Azure Sea sect, who had secretly seen through his background, and became their honored guest. The Songhai sect wanted to obtain the inheritance treasures of the Yingtian sect and the Failing sect from him, but unexpectedly, they failed to steal the chicken and ended up losing the rice. Not only did Qingjian Laozu escape from the Songhai sect, but not long after Qingjian Laozu escaped from the Songhai sect, the flowing sword of the thin water flowing sword, a pair of flying swords passed down by the founder of the Songhai sect, was also stolen. Originally, the Songhai sect thought that Laozu had stolen the flowing sword and joined forces with the cultivators of the sect to suppress him. Unexpectedly, they had no evidence, and under Qingjian Laozu's meticulous plan, they had angered the cultivators of the North Sea. In the end, they had only seriously injured Qingjian Laozu. During this period of time, the Songhai sect had been secretly taken advantage of by Laozu. He had snuck into the Songhai sect and forcefully taken the thin water sword, causing the Songhai sect to become the laughingstock of the North Sea cultivation world. As a result, the Songhai sect had split up. Although Qingjian Laozu had many alibis at the time to prove that he was not the one who stole the flowing sword, Lu Ping had always believed that the flowing sword of the Azure Sea sect was actually stolen by Qingjian Laozu. Especially after knowing that Laozu was actually a disciple of the Yingtian sect, Lu Ping was even more convinced of his own judgment. He even suspected that this was a tacit cooperation between Qingjian Laozu and Laozu. Of course, as the person involved and the victim, the Songhai sect naturally believed it. Unfortunately, the Songhai sect, which was already in internal strife, had no time to care about Qingjian Laozu. Qingjian Laozu seemed to be quite tactful and quickly disappeared from the North Sea cultivation world. In fact, it was because after being injured by Laozu of the Songhai sect, there was almost no hope of recovery. Disheartened, he built the Qingjian cave abode at the bottom of the sea and lived in seclusion. Lu Ping's current divine sense cultivation, eyesight, and insight were no longer the same as when he first entered the Qingjian cave abode. Lu Ping walked around the hall and finally looked at the core of the abandoned waterproof formation in the middle of the hall. Lu Ping walked to the core of the formation and suddenly stomped down. With a muffled dong, it seemed like the entire mountain began to shake. However, Lu Ping seemed to be unaware of it. He raised his foot and stomped down again. Dong, the ground creaked like a spider web with the core of the formation as the center. It seemed like the entire mountain was about to collapse. However, Lu Ping did not look worried at this time. Instead, his face showed surprise. A cold light like autumn water flashed in the cracked core of the formation. Lu Ping raised his foot and stomped down for the third time. Amidst the clanging sound, a 3-foot-long sword hung upside down from the ground, and Lu Ping grabbed it in his hand. Amidst the clanging sound, the long sword vibrated violently in Lu Ping's hand like a stream of water, trying to break free from Lu Ping's grasp. However, how could Lu Ping let it do as it wished at this time? Suddenly, a rich bluish-purple Zhen Yuan rose in his hand, resolving the huge force brought by the vibration of the long sword. At the same time, the bluish-purple Zhen Yuan went straight into the long sword, intending to completely refine and subdue this flying sword. The long sword was still trembling. However, when Lu Ping's bluish-purple Zhen Yuan wrapped around it, the long sword seemed to suddenly show a feeling of fear. The violent trembling was no longer to break free from Lu Ping's control, but instead seemed to be afraid of something. However, although the long sword could no longer resist Lu Ping's control, it still stubbornly resisted the invasion of Lu Ping's Zhen Yuan. It seemed to know that once this bluish-purple Zhen Yuan invaded, it would lose its freedom again. Humph, a mere sword spirit dares to resist? As a famous sword spirit, it should fight for the world. If you continue to resist my Zhen Yuan refinement, I will seal you again, and we will talk about it again after 4,000 or 5,000 years of darkness. If you surrender to me, I will make you a famous sword spirit in the world. What do you think? Lu Ping's divine sense wrapped around the entire long sword, and Lu Ping's thoughts were transmitted to the long sword over and over again. Perhaps Lu Ping's vigorous Zhen Yuan broke through the resistance of the long sword, or perhaps Lu Ping's words were recognized by the long sword, but Lu Ping felt that the Zhen Yuan in his hand, which was originally blocked outside, suddenly seemed to flow into a bottomless pit. However, Lu Ping's quintessential essence was extremely abundant. After the first wave of quintessential essence flowed into the sword, another wave of quintessential essence flowed into the sword through his bloodline that was like an endless river. The long sword trembled violently again. This time, it was not resistance, not fear, but excitement. At this moment, Lu Ping finally received the long sword's recognition, and it was completely refined by Lu Ping. Lu Ping held the long sword horizontally, and on the back of the sword were two ancient characters, flowing flow. It really was the flowing sword. The pair of flying swords used by Laozu, the founder of the Blue Sea sect, were collectively known as the thin water flowing sword. Perhaps this pair of flying swords were not the top magic treasures in the Blue Sea sect, but they were the symbol of the Blue Sea sect's magic treasures. Their status in the Blue Sea sect was not lower than any of the magic treasures. Lu Ping casually threw the flowing sword into the air. As he controlled the flying sword, he familiarized himself with the characteristics of the flying sword. However, he seemed to have suddenly discovered something, and a trace of joy appeared on his face. 8 treasure seals. Didn't they say that the thin water flowing sword condensed 7 treasure seals each, and the power of the two swords combined is no less than a spirit-nurturing magic treasure with 8 treasure seals? Lu Ping's divine sense entered the long sword again. Sure enough, there were 8 seals carved on the sword's blade, and each seal was different. The long stream sword was a spirit-nurturing mystic treasure with 8 seals carved on it. However, this was not a big deal. The founder of the Blue Sea sect might have really only condensed 7 treasure seals on this pair of flying swords, and then the Blue Sea sect had been teleported for thousands of years. How could it not have improved the two swords by another level? At the same time, when fighting against an enemy, the thin water unending flow sword, which originally only had 7 treasured restrictions, suddenly unleashed the power of an 8 treasured restrictions spirit-nurturing magic treasure. This was undoubtedly a disaster for the enemy. Or perhaps this was the work of Qingjian Laozu. However, Lu Ping did not hope that the 8th treasure seal was condensed by Qingjian Laozu. The thin water flowing sword was a pair of flying swords, and the treasure seals condensed must be in pairs. Qingjian Laozu only stole the flowing sword, but the thin water sword fell into the hands of Zhongshuan Laozu. If the flowing sword was condensed with a new treasure seal, but the thin water sword did not, then when the two flying swords combined again, the power would be greatly reduced. As for why Qingjian Laozu and Zhongshuan Laozu stole the thin water flowing sword, what secret was hidden in this pair of flying swords? It could actually cause the Blue Sea sect to fall into a situation of division after losing the flying swords. Thousands of years later, when the thin water sword was auctioned by the Blue Sea sect, the Blue Sea sect and the Blue Waves sect were reunited. Lu Ping examined the flowing sword for a long time, but he could not see what secret was hidden in it. This was probably only known by the Blue Sea sect and the long-dead Zhongshuan Laozu and Qingjian Laozu. With the flowing sword, which was a spirit-nurturing treasure, plus the ocean-crossing boat and the cloud-light multicolored robe, Lu Ping was even more confident about this trip to Middle-earth. The entrance to the underground cave was already exposed when Lu Ping broke the floor of the hall. Lu Ping walked straight down, passed through the cave that had long become an underwater ruin, and came to an underground crack that used to be a pond. When Lu Ping dived to the bottom of the crack, the scenery around him had not changed at all, and this made Lu Ping's mind finally calm down. With a flick of his long sleeves, the soil that covered the teleportation formation was lifted up, and the teleportation formation that was buried in the sea soil reappeared in front of Lu Ping. After carefully examining the teleportation formation and making sure that it was not damaged, Lu Ping embedded 12 upper-grade spirit stones on the edge of the teleportation formation. He suddenly activated the teleportation formation, but he had already retreated from the teleportation formation. With a hum, the teleportation formation flashed with a faint light, and the 12 upper-grade spirit stones all exploded. However, Lu Ping showed a happy expression. The teleportation formation needs both ends to be unobstructed. This test proves that the teleportation formation at the destination is also undamaged, so I can activate it without worry. Lu Ping flipped his palm, and a simple and unadorned spirit stone appeared in Lu Ping's hand. After Celestial Phenomenon Laozu's reward and the battle on Frost Island, the number of top-grade spirit stones in Lu Ping's hands had increased again. At this time, he already had almost 20 of them. However, to him, every time he used one, he would have one less. If it wasn't for the fact that he needed a top-grade spirit stone to activate the teleportation formation to Middle-earth, he would definitely not be willing to use it. After embedding the top-grade spirit stone into the center of the teleportation formation disk, Lu Ping embedded another 36 upper-grade spirit stones along the outside of the disk to form a circle. Lu Ping took a deep breath, and looked back in the direction of Huangli Island for some reason. Then, he decisively activated the teleportation formation. A white light instantly appeared from the teleportation formation. Then, the light became brighter and brighter, and gradually, Lu Ping's figure was completely submerged in the light. The white light lasted for about 10 minutes before slowly dying out. At this time, Lu Ping's figure could no longer be seen in the teleportation formation. Only the sea soil around the teleportation formation and the sky fell down again, covering the teleportation formation disk with a thick layer of sea soil, as if nothing had happened. Chapter 621. A thin layer of twilight snow covered the vast land, and the bleak cold wind whistled across the land, rolling up countless snowflakes as if raising a layer of white mist. Lu Ping stood in the wilderness and took a deep breath. A piercing chill rose from his nose straight to his brain, making Lu Ping's spirit suddenly become extremely light. Is this the winter in Middle-earth? Lu Ping gazed into the distance. The vast wilderness stretched as far as the eye could see, but there was no trace of human beings. He had been here for 7 days, and he had explored more than 100 miles around the teleportation array. However, within 100 miles, Lu Ping did not find any trace of human gathering. Instead, there were many traces of beasts and even demonic cultivators. He had never seen such a vast land. In the North Sea, the largest island was said to be Xianling Sec's Xianling Island, which was only 800 miles in circumference, while Zhenling's True Spirit Island was only 700 miles in circumference. Although Lu Ping had only carefully explored the area of 100 miles, he could still see the vast land, wilderness, and mountains hundreds of miles away. If it were overseas, this area would have already exceeded the rarely seen giant islands, and the giant islands Lu Ping himself had seen were only the sunken Fei Ling Island and the East Sea Northern Alliance's Qianyuan Island and a few other islands. After another fruitless search, Lu Ping turned around and fled in the opposite direction. 100 miles south of this vast wilderness was a continuous mountain range. Lu Ping had also explored the mountain range, but he only went 100 miles deep before he found traces of high-grade demonic cultivators. Lu Ping did not want to alert the enemy, so he returned to the border between the mountain range and the wilderness. Not far into the mountain range, Lu Ping's escape light fell straight into a canyon with a mountain stream of unknown origin. The escape light went against the direction of the canyon until it came to a cliff with towering mountains on both sides, as if it had been split by a giant axe. The mountain stream surged and slapped against the cliff, making a sizzling sound. When the mountain stream receded a little, the escape light went directly into the bottom of the cliff and disappeared in the blink of an eye. At the bottom of the cliff was a wide underground cave, and on the periphery of the cave was a large piece of rock hanging down from the top, just covering the cave. No one would have thought that there would be such a secret place at the bottom of the flowing water of the cliff. The escape light dissipated after entering the cave. Lu Ping strode deeper into the cave. When he came to a stone wall at the bottom of the cave, Lu Ping made a few hand seals and disappeared into the stone wall. After passing through the stone wall, Lu Ping entered a vast underground stone hall of nearly 100 feet. The fluorescent stones inlaid on the surrounding stone walls exuded a misty white light, illuminating the stone hall as if it was daytime. The rich aura filled the entire stone hall. It seemed that there was at least a medium-sized spiritual vein under this cave stone hall. At the edge of the stone hall, there were several stone rooms. There were stone tables and stone chairs in the stone rooms. At this time, Samling, De Bao, Lu Qiner, and Lu Dague, the 6 monster pets, each occupied a stone room. In front of each of them were a few jade slips and a few sets of paper books. They were either holding the jade slips to check the information in them, or flipping through the paper books, scratching their ears and scratching their cheeks to figure out something. Seeing Lu Ping coming in, everyone cheered like a swarm of bees. The jade slips and books in their hands were thrown aside and ran towards Lu Ping. Even Lu Dague, who had always been honest and obedient, also had a relieved expression after seeing Lu Ping return. Lu Ping said with a fierce face, "What, do you understand all these things?" All the monster pets retreated in embarrassment. Lu Ping snorted coldly and said, "Before you all advanced to the core forging stage, you were still in the form of a monster. Although you had spiritual wisdom, you didn't understand the ways of the world. Now that you have advanced to the transformation stage, what's the difference between you and the human race?" Lu Ping paused. Seeing that all the monsters lowered their heads and had learned expressions, his face did not relax in the slightest. He still said in a deep voice, "Books can increase wisdom. The demon race is born with a tyrannical body and a longer lifespan than the human race. Even the swallowing of heaven and earth's spiritual chi is an instinct. Why can the human race stand side by side with the demon race? Even the wilderness of the Central Plains is occupied by the human race, while the demon race can only stand in such a harsh place as the mountains and swamps. The fundamental reason lies in the wisdom of the human race, but where does wisdom come from? Other than innate wisdom, it comes from these inherited ancient books." Lu Ping saw that all the monsters began to listen to his heart. His tone relaxed a little, but he still solemnly said, "These ancient books should have been brought out by Qingjian Laozu from the Yingtian sect's dojo after the destruction of the Yingtian sect. Although it is not a drop in the ocean of the Yingtian sect's inheritance, for any cultivator, it is a precious treasure. I will bring these ancient books back to the sect in the future. You all should take this opportunity to study them. It will be of great benefit to your future cultivation." All the monster pets obediently returned to their respective stone rooms. They picked up the jade slips or books again and began to study the ancient books of the Yingtian sect left behind by Qingjian Laozu. At the other end of the stone hall was the largest stone room. This was Lu Ping's temporary secret cultivation room. The medium spirit vein in the stone hall was also imprisoned under this stone room. In the center of the stone room was an ultra-long distance teleportation array. 7 days ago, after Lu Ping left the teleportation array of the Qingjian cave abode, he reappeared in this stone room. Lu Ping sat cross-legged on the stone bed in the stone room. On a stone table beside the stone bed, there was a small incense burner fixed on the stone table. This small stone incense burner was the imprisonment magic treasure of the medium spirit vein under the stone room. It was also the core of a concealment array in the stone hall. This was obviously a secret cave abode operated by Qingjian Laozu in the Middle Earth. From the harvest in the cave abode, the dojo of the Yingtian sect must be hidden in the area near this secret cave abode. However, in the past 7 days, Lu Ping had searched the area within 100 miles of the cave abode but found nothing. Lu Ping originally thought that Qingjian Laozu must know the location of the hidden dojo of the Yingtian sect. In that case, the teleportation array built in the cave abode that led to the Middle Earth must not be too far from the hidden dojo of the Yingtian sect. It might even lead directly to the dojo. In reality, from the harvest Lu Ping obtained in this cave abode, the dojo of the Yingtian sect could indeed be hidden nearby. However, with Lu Ping's current cultivation and divine power, he obviously could not find the location of the dojo. Thinking about it, it made sense. The Yingtian sect had been destroyed for thousands of years, and the dojo was hidden in the void. In these thousands of years, it must have attracted countless cultivators from the Middle Earth to search for it. However, no one had found the location of the dojo. From this, it could be seen how mysterious the Yingtian sect's void concealment array was. Tian Shui Laozu once said that the Yingtian sect's protective array did not specialize in defense, but in concealment. Its level of profoundness was comparable to the North Sea's 7 Stars cave abode. From the looks of it, it was true. After thinking about it, Lu Ping could only place his hopes on the ancient records of the Yingtian sect that he found in the cave abode. He hoped that he could find some clues about the dojo of the Yingtian sect from these ancient records. However, even though there were not many ancient records in the cave abode, the content was extremely vast. Without a choice, Lu Ping released all 6 of his spiritual pets and allowed them to study these ancient records. At the same time, he searched for any records related to the Yingtian sect's dojo. As for Lu Ping, he would occasionally go out to investigate the surroundings of the cave abode. Even though he knew that the chances of finding anything were slim, Lu Ping still persisted in investigating the surrounding 100 kilometers. Lu Ping's divine will entered his storage artifact. First, he took out 4 spirit-gathering pearls, 1 big and 3 small. These were the small spirit-gathering pearls that Lu Ping had found in the mid-sized spirit vein of the cave abode by De Bao the moment he arrived at the cave abode. After that, Lu Ping took out 3 purple jade scrolls that were glowing with spiritual light from his storage ring. His hands formed a few spirit-dispersing arts, and after dispelling the restrictions on the jade scrolls, Lu Ping's divine will entered them and began to investigate the contents of the jade scrolls. These 3 jade scrolls recorded 3 sets of inherited techniques from the Yingtian sect. These 3 sets of inherited techniques recorded the entire process of training from the blood condensation realm to the late Dharma stage. As of now, there were only 6 complete sets of inherited techniques in the Zhenling sect. Furthermore, one of them was not even considered a true inherited technique. The rules of the Zhenling sect were rather unique. For a set of techniques to be on the same level as a technique that could not be passed down, the practitioner had to train this set of techniques to the late Dharma stage. This was also why, when sage Liang Xianfeng had obtained the Linhai wave listening technique from the Zhongshuan cave abode in the East Sea and perfected Lu Tianling's and Laozu's training technique, the Linhai wave listening technique was still unable to become the 6th true inherited technique of the Zhenling sect. Even so, if Lu Ping brought these 3 sets of techniques back to the Zhenling sect, they would definitely be stored away by the Laozi sect. Then, they would begin to select the most outstanding blood condensation stage adepts from the sect to train with them. A complete set of training techniques would always be the foundation of a sect's legacy. The legacy of the Zhenling sect had been passed down for tens of thousands of years, but there were only 5 complete sets of true inherited techniques up to the late Dharma stage. This was one of the main reasons that restricted the growth of the Zhenling sect. Legend had it that a truly large sect would establish a complete set of inherited techniques. The complete set of inherited techniques had to cover all 7 bloodlines and 7 elements. There had to be at least 49 complete sets of complete inherited techniques up to the late Dharma stage. This meant that no matter what bloodline or element the disciple had, they would be able to find the best training technique that was suitable for them. Although the large sects could not be as perfect as the large sects, at the very least, they had to cover all 7 bloodlines and 7 attributes at the same time. Even if they were not suitable, they had to make sure that their disciples had at least 1 or 2 complete legacy cultivation techniques as a reference. Compared to the Jinling sect, the 5 complete sets of inherited techniques seemed unusually shabby. However, with these 3 sets of inherited techniques, in addition to Lu Tianling's complete Lin Hai wave listening technique, the Jinling sect would have at least 9 complete sets of inherited techniques. Although it still would not be able to cover all 7 elements and 7 bloodlines, it was at least one step closer to the standard of a large sect. Chapter 622. Lu Ping took out a wooden box carved with second-class spiritual materials from his storage ring. He removed the spirit sealing restriction spell on the surface of the box. More than half of the box was inside. There were 31 pieces in total. Lu Ping had found them next to the incense burner on the stone table when he had just been teleported to the stone room. This incense was called the Calming Soul Incense. It was made with several precious spices. It was a famous luxury in the world of practitioners. It was considered a luxury because, as far as Lu Ping knew, one of the materials used to make incense was the powder of the soul-nurturing wood, a mid-grade mystic class wood element spiritual object of the universe. Lu Ping had a piece of soul-nurturing wood with him. It was the spirit-forging pill Lu Ping had obtained from Mount Fei Ling. He had given it to the school and begged Reverend Jiang Xianlin to get it for him. Compared to the spirit-forging pill, the soul-nurturing wood wasn't worth mentioning at all. However, Lu Ping was only a minor repairs in the early stage of the blood condensation realm. Even if the school wanted to increase the reward, he didn't dare ask for it. Besides, because of the spirit-forging pill, the most outstanding second-generation disciples of Jinling had helped him a lot. Reverend Jiang Xianlin had even introduced him to Reverend Lu Xianlin and made him the 9th disciple of Chonghua Mansion. Although the soul-nurturing wood was no longer of interest to Lu Ping, he didn't want to use it to make something as luxurious as the Calming Soul incense. Moreover, Lu Ping had used the soul-nurturing wood to practice the soul-splitting secret technique for almost 20 years. Originally, Lu Ping had thought that the spiritual object wouldn't be of much use to him after he mastered the secret technique. However, after Lu Ping had obtained the inheritance of his clone, he discovered that the spiritual object, which had been imbued with his own energy, was an indispensable material for refining a clone. As a result, the soul-nurturing wood became Lu Ping's treasure again. Lu Ping had only seen this kind of incense at his teacher Lu Tianling's Dharma manifestation ceremony. According to Reverend Li Xuanru, it was the leftovers of Jiang Tianlin Laozu's Dharma manifestation ceremony. Back then, Lu Ping had used amethyst honey to make top-grade spirit tea. When Tianlu Laozu found out about it, he repeatedly scolded him for being extravagant. However, the difference between amethyst honey tea and calming soul incense was like heaven and earth. If Lu Ping had something as precious as the calming soul incense, it could only be the top-grade spirit tea brewed by Lu Ping with amethyst royal jelly at Lu Tianling Laozu's Dharma manifestation ceremony. It was said that after Tianling Laozu's Dharma manifestation ceremony ended, she was angrily blocked by Tianlu Laozu. In the end, she promised to refine 5 batches of pills for Tianling Laozu. However, the condition was that Tianling Laozu had to hand over all the royal jelly that Lu Ping had given her to the pill pavilion to be used for refining pills. Only then did she return to the pill pavilion with satisfaction. The biggest effect of the calming soul incense was that when a cultivator was cultivating, it could allow the cultivator to fully immerse himself in cultivation as quickly as possible. It could clear his mind and improve his understanding of cultivation methods and divine abilities during the process of cultivation without being distracted by external factors. In addition, the calming soul incense was also very effective in nurturing and restoring a cultivator's divine sense. Lu Ping put a piece of calming soul incense into the stone incense burner and then slowly baked it with the blue spiritual fire. After a while, a deep and distant fragrance slowly came out of the incense burner and then filled the entire stone room. Lu Ping's divine sense quickly calmed down in the verification and analysis of the 3 sets of cultivation methods. The fragrance continued to spread throughout the entire cave. The 6 spiritual pets who were originally sitting there and trying to figure out the inheritance ancient books of the Ying Tian sect because of Lu Ping's request seemed to suddenly have some understanding and quietened down a lot. Lu Ping had obtained a lot of ancient books in this secret cave of Laozu in the clear stream. In addition to the most important and most complete set of 10,000 sets of inheritance ancient books, there were also 5 sets of other ancient books for cultivation up to the Dharma manifestation stage. In addition, there were many inheritance ancient books about alchemy, weapon forging, talisman making and so on. Although they were scattered, they were also all-inclusive. As Lu Ping forced his spiritual pets to read these inheritance ancient books, he also hoped that they would organize these scattered ancient books. Most of the contents recorded in these ancient books were not complete. Some had a beginning but no end, some had a beginning but no end, and some only had the middle part without the beginning and the end. However, these ancient books obviously had a general pattern of inheritance, and it was obvious that they came from the same style of the sect. Then, these ancient books were obviously collected by Laozu in an extremely chaotic place, which was why they appeared so messy and unsystematic. In fact, this situation made Lu Ping even more certain that Laozu had been to the dojo of the Ying Tian sect. This was because according to what Lu Ping knew, when a sect was facing a crisis, they would often scatter the ancient books passed down by the sect and hide them everywhere. This was to prevent external enemies from invading and to find the complete inheritance of the sect in the process of looting. Once this happened, not only would the sect suffer great losses, but the external enemies could also rely on these looted complete inheritances to strengthen themselves. In the future, it would be too difficult for the sect to take revenge even if it wanted to. This was equivalent to aiding the enemy in disguise. After the ancient books were scattered, even if part of the inheritance was looted, the external enemies would not be able to figure out any complete inheritance from them. At most, they would only be able to use it as a reference, and the sect could use the disciples who cultivated these inheritances to perfect these lost ancient books in the future. Since Qingjian Laozu had found the dojo of the Ying Tian sect, why couldn't he find all the ancient books passed down by the Ying Tian sect? After all, Qingjian Laozu was a disciple of the Ying Tian sect. To Lu Ping, this problem was easier to explain. First, the Canghai sect had been deceived by Qingjian Laozu. He was not a disciple of the Ying Tian sect at all. He was just a lucky person who had found the dojo of the Ying Tian sect and obtained part of the inheritance of the Ying Tian sect. Secondly, even though the Ying Tian sect was a large sect that was known for its defense, the various protective matrices and prohibitions within the dojo were not something that an early Dharma adept like Qingjian Laozu could completely break through. Qingjian Laozu had only broken through some of the prohibitions that he could break after entering the dojo and obtained some scattered ancient books. This was also the reason why the ancient books that Lu Ping had obtained in the cave were not systematic. After a night of enlightenment, Lu Ping had gained a lot. Even though he still could not see the essence of the 3 complete sets of inherited techniques, it was still useful for Lu Ping's training. Lu Ping sealed the 3 purple jade slips with a spirit sealing seal and put them away in his interspatial ring. Then, he took out a 3-legged cauldron that was half the height of a human and placed it on the ground. A top-grade alchemy cauldron, the Flying Rainbow Cauldron. Lu Ping had long suspected that since Qingjian Laozu was able to imitate the failing sect's spirit forging pill, no matter how bad his alchemy skills were, he should at least be a master alchemist. Otherwise, how could he have created a spirit forging pill of such high quality? However, Lu Ping did not obtain Qingjian Laozu's cauldron, spirit fire, and other items from the North Sea Qingjian cave. There were only a few elixir recipes and inherited techniques. Initially, Lu Ping thought that the other cultivators who had gone to explore the cave had obtained them. However, after that incident, Lu Ping had asked around and confirmed that the other cultivators did not obtain the cauldron, spirit fire, and other items. He did not expect that Qingjian Laozu's real alchemy place was in this secret cave. The quality of this flying rainbow cauldron was not inferior to the top-rank cauldron that Lu Ping had once controlled. If he handed it over to the sect, Fornax Laozu would certainly be happy from ear to ear. However, if he wanted to obtain this flying rainbow cauldron, Lu Ping would definitely have to extort a lot of good things from Fornax Laozu. However, for now, it was still better to refine it as his own spare cauldron. When Lu Ping was an alchemy master, he originally controlled a top-rank cauldron. At that time, Lu Ping replaced the Nanchuan cauldron with the Linchuan cauldron, and that top-rank cauldron just happened to be a spare cauldron. However, Jinling had a shortage of cauldrons, and Lu Ping usually did not have any use for that top-rank cauldron. Thus, at the request of Fornax Laozu, he returned the top-rank cauldron back to the Pill Pavilion. Currently, Lu Ping had a magic treasure-level cauldron, the Nanchuan cauldron, but a magic treasure-level cauldron was after all too eye-catching. However, Lu Ping just happened to lack a cauldron that could be used to deceive people. The appearance of this flying rainbow cauldron was just right. After refining the flying rainbow cauldron, Lu Ping flipped his hand and another orange flame appeared. Looking at this flame, Lu Ping shook his head in pity. After all, thousands of years had passed, and the little orange flame, which was originally a heaven-level lower-grade spirit fire, had become a third-grade spirit material due to the gradual loss of spirituality. Although it could still be used to refine pills, the effect would probably not be as good as the blue spirit fire in Lu Ping's hands. There were still some spirit herbs and spirit pills hidden in the pill room of the cave dwelling. However, most of these spirit pills and spirit herbs were not properly stored, so most of them had lost their effectiveness. There were only a few bottles of late core forging realm and manifestation realm spirit pills left. Perhaps it was because they were too valuable that he used a top-grade jade essence bottle and cast a spirit sealing restriction, which was why they did not lose their effectiveness. Just as Lu Ping was preparing to take stock of his other gains and the spoils of war from killing a few cultivators on Frost Island, De Bao excitedly ran into Lu Ping's stone room. The moment he entered the secret room, he shouted, "Boss, boss, there's some progress. We might be able to find the Dao field of Yingtian sect." Although the 6 spirit pets were forced by Lu Ping to read the records of Yingtian sect, these records were scattered and vast, so the 6 of them could only pick the ones that interested them. Samling and Lu Qiner were only interested in the growth of their own strength, so they mostly browsed through the jade scrolls that recorded the arts and techniques. Lu Dague, on the other hand, knew that his talent was not high. If he wanted to achieve something in the future, he would have to spend a lot of effort to stabilize his cultivation foundation. Therefore, he mostly studied the records of cultivation methods. De Bao, on the other hand, was different. He had once told Lu Ping that he wanted to appraise all the treasures in the world. Therefore, what he was interested in were all kinds of miscellaneous books in the cultivation world, his travels, and the catalogs of spirit herbs and spirit materials. It was precisely because he had read the most extensive records that he found some clues about Yingtian sect's Dao field from a record that recorded the history of Yingtian sect. Chapter 623. The boat transformed into the size of a small boat and traveled against the flow of the river outside the cave. Lu Ping stood at the bow of the boat, and beside him was a plump young man who looked to be about 17 or 18 years old. However, this young man's plump body was holding onto a small head. His pair of small eyes shone brightly as he scanned his surroundings. His too thin yet long mustache stretched outwards, causing him to look very comical. "Boss, do you think that this river is the Ying River?" The young man with the mustache stood behind Lu Ping and asked with a smile. "It's possible. I believe that there will be villages along the river. When the time comes, we can just ask them." The Yingtian sect was very famous in the past. The Ying River goes around the heavenly mountain, so it is called the Ying Tian sect. I believe that it should be quite famous. Just as Lu Ping finished speaking, the sound of a fisherman's song could be heard from upstream. The fisherman's song was loud and clear, but it could be heard that the person singing was a young man. Lu Ping and De Bao looked towards the source of the sound. After a while, they saw a young man who looked to be about 14 or 15 years old holding a long pole and pushing a small boat down slowly from upstream. The fisherman's song was sung by this young man. When the young man saw that the boat under Lu Ping and De Bao's feet was able to drift upstream without anyone paddling, he did not show any surprise. Instead, he asked in a loud voice, "Are the two of you immortals who have come to admire the ruins of the Ying Tian sect? Why don't you take my small boat? I'm familiar with the way, but the boat is moving slowly so that the two immortals can enjoy the scenery on both sides of the river." Lu Ping felt that this young man was quite bold. An ordinary mortal young man did not show the slightest bit of fear when he saw a cultivator. Instead, he dared to open his mouth and invite him to board the boat. However, when he heard this young man say that they were looking for the sky overflow ruins, and it seemed like this young man was very familiar with the location of the sky overflow ruins, his heart skipped a beat. He smiled and asked, "You're quite funny, young man. The speed of the boat under my feet is up to me. Why can't I see the scenery on both sides of the river? Why do I need to steer your slow boat?" When the young man came near, he raised his pole and stopped the boat. Seeing that it was Lu Ping who asked the question, he knew that Lu Ping was the one who made the decision, so he cupped his hands in greeting and said, "Even immortals have their own feelings. The scenery on both sides of the Ying River is beautiful. If you take this junior's boat, immortals will feel less impatient and more leisurely. Moreover, I know this surplus river like the back of my hand, and I'm also very familiar with the surplus sky ruins. It can be said that I'm very familiar with this place." When Lu Ping looked over, he saw that although the young man spoke calmly, there was a look of anticipation in his eyes. Lu Ping smiled and said, "All right, we're also going to the surplus sky ruins to take a look. Since you know the way, let's take this young man's boat." When De Bao heard this, he came forward worriedly and said, "Boss, today is already the 8th day. I believe that the Laozu from the various sects in the North Sea should have already reached the Middle Earth. Time is of the essence, so why do we need to take this young man's boat? If this young man really knows where the surplus sky ruins is, he can just fly there with him. Moreover, this young man's gaze is not pure. I'm afraid he has other intentions." Lu Ping smiled without saying a word. De Bao knew that Lu Ping already had an idea, so he retreated behind him and did not say anything else. When the young man heard that Lu Ping had agreed, his face instantly became excited. He hurriedly moved the boat over. Lu Ping and De Bao directly walked onto the boat, but the boat did not move at all. "Immortals, please sit tight. This young man is starting the boat." The young man deftly turned the boat around in the water. He pushed the pole downwards, and the boat immediately moved forward. De Bao looked at the young man in surprise and said, "How old are you this year, kid? You're so strong." The young man seemed to be used to being asked this way by ordinary people. He smiled and said, "This young man is already 12 this year. It's just that I've been strong since I was young, and I'm tall, so most people think that I'm only 14 or 15 years old. Born with great strength?" De Bao smiled and asked again, "You just said that this river is the surplus river, and you immediately guessed that we're going to see the surplus sky ruins. Could it be that this surplus sky ruins is very easy to find, and many immortals come here to admire it?" The young man was indeed very strong. He slowly pushed the boat against the current and answered unhurriedly, "The surplus river surrounds the sky mountain, which is why the surplus sky sect was formed. The surplus sky sect is located on the sky mountain, but it's already in ruins now. I've heard many immortals say that the surplus sky sect is a great sect in the world. Every year and every month, there will be immortals coming here to admire the ruins. Sometimes, this young man is lucky enough to ferry one or two immortals to the Sky Mountain. Debeo snorted and said, "What do you mean by admiring the ruins? I'm afraid you're here to search for treasures." However, when he remembered that they were also here for the surplus Sky Sect's dojo that was hidden in the void, he could not help but blush. However, Debeo was thick-skinned, so the blush only lasted for a moment. He continued to ask, "Have you seen the surplus Sky ruins before?" The young man pursed his lips and said, "How can I not have seen it before? However, this young man is just an ordinary person. What I saw was just a pile of broken bricks and tiles. I also find it strange that when immortals come here to admire the ruins, they always look around and even rummage through it, which makes the ruins even more dilapidated. It's as if they're looking for something. You didn't go in and rummage through it?" "No, the ruins on the Sky Mountain are occupied by the immortals of the Surplus River Sect, Yingshan Sect, and Tao Universe Sect. The immortals of the three sects guard it together. If you want to enter the Sky Mountain, you have to get their permission and hand over some spirit stones." Surplus River Sect, Yingshan Sect, Tao Universe Sect. What sect is that? Is it very powerful? How many Dharma adepts does the sect have, Laozu? When Debeo heard this, he was a little surprised and asked a series of questions. However, he saw that the young man had a blank look on his face. He clearly did not know what Debeo was asking about, but he still answered anyway. Lu Ping, who was standing at the side, asked, "Did all the cultivators who were sent here hand over spirit stones to go up the mountain?" The young man shook his head and said, "Not really. This young man does not know how they disappeared. They must have used immortal techniques to hide themselves from the immortals guarding the Sky Mountain. Boss, it looks like the cultivators from the three sects who guard the surplus Sky ruins aren't people with high cultivation. I'm afraid that the ruins weren't forcefully occupied by the three sects with formations." Debeo said after some thought. Lu Ping nodded and said, "That's normal. Let's not talk about the strength of the three sections. If they really surrounded the ruins of the surplus Sky sect with a formation and didn't allow anyone to enter or leave as they pleased, they would definitely incur the wrath of the public. Therefore, the cultivators sent by the three sects are definitely not people with high cultivation. If they encounter cultivators with low cultivation, they will collect some spirit stones, but cultivators with high cultivation won't care about the spirit stones. Even if there are some who are unwilling to pay, they can just sneak in. I believe the cultivators from the three sects will just turn a blind eye to it." At this moment, the voice of the young man on the boat rang out. With a hint of embarrassment, he said, "Immortals, this young man has sent the two of you over. I wonder if the two of you can give this young man one or two spirit stones as a reward." Debeo said with some displeasure, "You're just a mortal boy, what use do you have for spirit stones? You're just attracting the greed of others. If you run into a cultivator with bad intentions, they'll steal your spirit stones and then casually kill you. Do you think someone will help you? I have a piece of gold here. I'll give it to you when we reach the Sky Mountain. It'll be enough for you to live comfortably for a year without having to walk on the surplus river." When the young man heard what Debeo said, he quickly waved his hand and said, "Immortals, please don't be angry. This young man is not greedy. It's just that my mother is bedridden. All the doctors in the surrounding villages have not been able to cure her. The doctors said that perhaps only the immortals of the Surplus River Sect can cure her. If we want to ask the immortals of the Surplus River Sect to cure my mother, we'll need spirit stones." Debeo glanced at Lu Ping. Seeing that he was not concerned about these things, he waved his hand impatiently and said, all right. You're lucky today. One or two spirit stones are not enough for us. Just row your boat. When we reach the destination, I'll give you 2 spirit stones." The young man was overjoyed and thanked Lu Ping profusely. He used more strength to push the pole in his hand. Even though the boat was going against the current, its speed was not slow. 2 hours later, the the young man still had not used up all his strength. His face was slightly red, and his breathing was a little faster. Even though the surplus river flowed through the mountain range, the river's flow was not rapid. Both sides of the river seemed to enter a basin. However, even Lu Ping found it unbelievable that a 12-year-old young man was able to row a 3-person boat against the current for such a long time. With De Bao and Lu Ping's foresight, they could tell at a glance that the young man hadn't awakened his bloodline, and there wasn't even a trace of spiritual energy in his body. The fact that he was able to sail against the current for so long was all due to his strong physique and astounding strength. De Bao saw the curiosity on Lu Ping's face, so he asked, "Young man, where is your family from? What's your name? Who else is there in your family?" The young man wiped his sweat and took a deep breath. "Immortal, my surname is Du. My family is the Du family village by the surplus river. My mother is the only one in my family. My father gave me a nickname, Rengui. Later, the teacher in the village gave me a full name, Jalua. My name is Du Jalua." De Bao stroked his long beard. This action looked very funny to Du Jalua. He could not help but smile at De Bao. De Bao did not mind. Instead, he asked, "Little brother Du, you said that your mother's illness could only be treated by the cultivators of the Surplus River sect. I believe that your village is under the jurisdiction of the Surplus River sect. Then, didn't the cultivators of the Surplus River sect come to your village to activate your bloodline?" When he heard De Bao's question, Du Jalua, who had been smiling all this while, became much quieter. He said, "Why not? Unfortunately, I did not succeed. According to the immortals of the Surplus River sect, I sealed the spirituality of my bloodline because my body was too strong. I was unable to activate my bloodline. However, only 2 of the 20 to 30 children in my village were able to activate their bloodline and enter the Surplus River Immortal sect to become immortals." De Bao glanced at Lu Ping. When he saw Lu Ping's casual expression, he said softly, as expected. Chapter 624. De Bao glanced at Lu Ping, then turned to Du Jalua and asked, "Brat, did you accidentally eat some kind of treasure when you were young?" Du Jalua revealed a surprised expression and said, "Immortal, you must be joking. How could I have such fortune? Otherwise, I would probably have become an immortal by now. Why would I still need to fish on this river?" Lu Ping, who was listening to the conversation, saw a trace of vigilance in Du Jalua's eyes when he saw the surprise on Du Jalua's face. Lu Ping smiled silently. The small boat followed the flow of the river, and after another hour, a towering lone peak appeared in the distance. Du Jalua used all his strength to push the long pole, and the small boat slid forward for nearly 10 feet. When he took the opportunity to retract the pole, he said with a smile, "Immortals, please take a look. We're almost at the lone peak of the heavenly mountain where the remnants of Yingtian are located." Lu Ping looked at the lone peak that stood like a sharp sword from afar. He couldn't help but say curiously, "Eh. The lone peak of Sky Mountain is quite special. It actually divides the Ying River into 2 rivers. The Ying River just happens to circle the lone peak of Sky Mountain in the middle." Du Jalua revealed a look of astonishment and said, "This immortal indeed has good eyesight. This celestial mountain's lone peak is at least 10 miles away from us, yet an immortal can see it so clearly from such a distance. The Surplus River flows around Celestial Mountain's lone peak, which is how the Surplus Heavens sect got its name." When they reached the foot of the lone peak of Sky Mountain, Du Jalua steered the boat towards the shore. From afar, he could see a few rays of light rising from the mountainside and landing in the direction of Lu Ping and the others. "Hee hee, so it's the kid from the Du family. You're quite lucky today. You actually brought 2 cultivators here at once." When the light dissipated, 3 mid-blood condensation cultivators appeared. The 3 cultivators were wearing different robes. Clearly, they belonged to different sections. The one in the lead seemed to be familiar with Du Jialua as he started talking to him from afar. On the small boat, Du Jialua hurriedly bowed to the three of them and said, "Greetings, immortals. This time, I was just lucky. These two immortals took pity on me, which was why I was able to board this junior's boat. Otherwise, with the abilities of the immortals, how could I have wasted so much time to get here?" The cultivator in front looked at Lu Ping and Debao, and his heart sank. He hurriedly bowed and said, "Ing sect disciple Kai Yun greets the two seniors." After he finished speaking, he pointed at the two cultivators behind him and said, "These two are senior brothers from Yingshan sect and Dao Universe sect." The two cultivators who had come with Kai Yun had also discovered that Lu Ping and Debao were exuding an unfathomable aura, and they hurriedly stepped forward to pay their respects. Debao casually waved his hand and said, "The three of you don't have to do this. We are only here to see the ruins of Yingtian and pay our respects to the number one sect in the North Ice Plains in the past. I wonder what's left of the ruins on the peak of Tian Shan." Kai Yun revealed a troubled expression. The cultivation of the two cultivators in front of him was clearly unfathomable. In the past, when cultivators like Lu Ping arrived, they would directly enter the peak of Tian Shan. Why would they care about the disciples guarding the mountain? The cultivators from the three sects were also happy not to offend them. They would only stop cultivators below the core forging realm from entering the mountain and collect some fees from them. However, not only did these two not enter the peak of Tian Shan, but they even asked them about the ruins in a friendly manner. This caused Kai Yun and the others to be at a loss. Seeing that Kai Yun was momentarily stunned, Debao said with some displeasure, "I heard that you guys have to pay spirit stones to enter the Yingtian ruins. Don't tell me that you won't even answer our questions if we don't pay. How stingy. How many spirit stones do we have to pay for a single trip up the mountain? Just name a number. As long as it's not too ridiculous, we won't care about such a small amount of money. However, please explain the situation of the Yingtian ruins to us clearly." Kai Yun and the others didn't expect these two to be so easy to talk to. They automatically skipped over the part that Debao called them stingy, leaving only the second half of the sentence. Instantly, their faces lit up with ecstasy. The small amount of money, in the eyes of these core forging enlightened masters, was a huge fortune to these blood condensation realm cultivators. Hence, Kai Yun took the lead and said, "The ruins of the Yingtian ruins have been in ruins for thousands of years. However, the Yingtian sect was famous in the northern ice plains in the past. The sect's ancient books are as vast as the ocean. The two of you might be able to find some opportunities that others can't." Lu Ping looked in the direction that the three of them had come from. His divine sense instantly captured the traces of three core forging realm cultivators. They were obviously the strongest cultivators of the three sects stationed here. Furthermore, these three cultivators were also paying attention to Lu Ping and the others. After giving Debao a look, Debao took out two low-grade spirit stones. He threw one of them to Du Jialua, who was staring at Lu Ping and Kai Yun, but didn't dare to interrupt. He weighed the other spirit stone in his hand and said, "Kid, if you have nothing to do, wait for us here. When we come down, we'll take your boat back. At that time, we'll give you this spirit stone as well. How about it?" Du Jialua seemed to be struggling, but in the end, he couldn't resist the temptation of the spirit stone. He nodded and said, "I'll wait here for the two immortals to return." Debao turned to Kai Yun and asked, "How much do you need to pay for the passage?" Kai Yun smiled awkwardly and hesitated for a moment. Finally, he seemed to have made up his mind. However, there was still a hint of hesitation in his tone. He said, "Senior must be joking. Our three sects are here to preserve the ruins of the Yingtian sect as much as possible. If the two of you go together, how about 20 mid-grade spirit stones?" Debao looked at him with a smile that wasn't a smile. He seemed to have seen through Kai Yun's intentions. Just when Kai Yun was about to give in under Debao's stare, Debao casually threw 20 mid-grade spirit stones to him and said, "Your business is not bad. I'll have to give it a try next time." Kai Yun didn't understand what Debao meant. He quickly focused his attention on the 20 mid-grade spirit stones in his hand. For a mid-blood condensation cultivator, 20 mid-grade spirit stones could be considered a windfall. However, he didn't know how many of them would end up in the hands of the three of them. On top of the lone peak of the heavenly mountain, Debao couldn't help but open his mouth to speak. However, he saw Lu Ping make a shushing gesture. Debao was a smart person. When he saw Lu Ping's gesture, he knew that someone was secretly monitoring them. He followed Lu Ping and walked around the overgrown ruins. After a while, the two of them entered a colorful cloud. "Boss, this is simply a pile of broken bricks and broken tiles. Along the way, I didn't even find a single spiritual energy gathering area." For the past several thousand years, the cultivators who entered and exited this heavenly mountain lone peak were actually able to search this ruin so thoroughly that even a dignified core forging stage treasure-seeking mouse like me couldn't find a single trace of it. This can be considered a miracle. "I wonder if you've discovered anything, boss?" Lu Ping smiled and said, "What can I find? The Yingtian dojo has been missing for thousands of years. Countless cultivators have entered and exited this place, but none of them found anything. You're just a spirit-seeking mouse, so what can you do?" Debao was quite dissatisfied and corrected him, "Boss, I'm a treasure-seeking mouse, not a spirit-seeking mouse." However, those people from the Yinghe sect, Yingshan sect, and Dao Universe sect actually claimed this place as their own. They even thought of using this place to make a fortune. This is quite rare. 5 colored clouds surrounded the two of them as they floated all over the lone peak of the heavenly mountain. However, other than the broken rocks and tiles that were hidden in the green, there was not even a single carving that could prove that this was the remains of the Yingtian faction. Under the cover of the colorful cloud, Debao and Lu Ping casually wandered around the lone peak of the heavenly mountain. They reminisced about this large sect that had shaken the northern ice fields thousands of years ago. Even though the Yingtian sect had been destroyed for thousands of years, the layout of the Yingtian sect's buildings could still be seen from the broken walls on the lone peak of the heavenly mountain. Lu Ping wasn't proficient in the layout of formations. Otherwise, if Hu Lily was here, she would definitely be able to deduce and use the layout of the Yingtian sect's great sect protecting formation from the positions of these buildings. However, Lu Ping was quite knowledgeable when it came to deciphering the individual restrictions that made up a formation. It was a pity that the restrictions rarely used the location of the terrain. Debao accompanied Lu Ping as they looked at the ruins of the Yingtian sect for a long time. Finally, he couldn't help but ask, "Boss, what's so interesting about these ruins?" Lu Ping smiled and said, "It doesn't matter if I don't understand them. I can only see some clues from the buildings of the Yingtian sect. However, I can record the layout of these buildings and their positions. In the future, when the Zhenling sect becomes a large sect, the various buildings on Heaven's Spirit Mountain will definitely need to be renovated and expanded. When that time comes, the layout of the Yingtian sect will be very useful for our sect. Even though the Yingtian sect was destroyed, the ruins are still in good condition. I'm afraid it won't be easy to find such well-preserved ruins in the world of cultivation." Debao nodded his head as if he understood. After a while, he couldn't help but ask, "Boss, did you notice anything wrong with that little fellow called Du Jialua?" Lu Ping smiled and said, "He's just a lucky little fellow. It's rare for him to have some petty tricks up his sleeves." However, he didn't know that his little tricks might bring him a great calamity. Lu Ping looked at Debao and couldn't help but ask curiously, "Did you discover something else?" Seeing that he actually knew something that even his boss didn't know, Debao couldn't help but ask excitedly, "Boss, did you really not discover anything else?" Seeing that Lu Ping was amused and nodded his head, Debao's expression became even more excited. His mustache trembled as he chuckled softly and said, "Boss, there's a demonic aura on this kid's body." "Demonic aura?" Lu Ping was stunned for a moment. He really hadn't discovered this. Chapter 625. Demonic Aura. Lu Ping asked in surprise. Clearly, he did not sense any demonic aura from Du Jialuo's body. It's demonic aura. De Bao pointed at his own nose proudly and said, even though the demonic aura is very faint and other demonic cultivators might not be able to sense it, he can't hide it from me. Lu Ping finally looked interested and asked, can you tell what kind of demonic cultivator he is? De Bao's face fell and he said, Boss, it's already very good that I can sense the demonic aura from that kid. How can I tell what kind of demonic cultivator he is? But this kid is a real human and not a demon. Of course. Otherwise, even if he could hide it from me, how could he hide it from the Yinghe sect's cultivator who performed a blood test on him and performed a spell on him after he was awakened by the bloodline of the Yinghe sect cultivator? Lu Ping glanced at De Bao and said, you're saying that he has a demonic cultivator by his side? That's right. De Bao's expression became more and more excited and he even looked a little impatient. So what? De Bao's enthusiasm was doused by Lu Ping's disregard. Boss, my good boss. De Bao was so anxious that he ran around in circles in the cloud formed by the multicolored cloud light robe. That kid is obviously lying. In the cultivation world, it's only because the bloodline is thin that the bloodline cannot be awakened. I've never heard of anyone being born with divine strength that can restrict their bloodline from refining spirit qi. That kid has obviously consumed a heavenly treasure that can strengthen his body. That's why his body is so much stronger than others and he can't awaken his bloodline. Seeing that Lu Ping was still indifferent, De Bao finally couldn't take it anymore. He jumped in front of Lu Ping and said, it's a heavenly treasure that can increase the strength of the body. Boss, look at that kid. He's just a mortal, without any spiritual power to purify his body, but he can actually increase the strength of his body to the level of a low-grade magic tool. Aren't you tempted? What heavenly treasure did he eat? That treasure is probably comparable to the azure wood pure jade fruit you obtained in the fallen ruins, right? Lu Ping calmly said, this kind of treasure can only be produced once in thousands of years, and it will usually wither after it matures. Since he has already eaten it, then even if I find the place where the treasure grew from through him, I'm afraid I won't be able to find anything. Sigh, since that's the case, I'll send that brat away after we descend the mountain. Originally, I thought that I would be able to obtain a treasure from that brat, but it looks like that won't be possible now. That's not necessary. De Bao was a little confused by Lu Ping's words. He asked in confusion, Boss, then what do you mean? Do you know that if a mortal doesn't have spiritual power to purify his body, even if he uses a treasure that strengthens his body, it's still impossible for the treasure's effect to be completely applied to his body? Then where will the effect be? De Bao asked in confusion, will it be wasted? A large part of the treasure's effect will be hidden in the mortal's bloodline. This is the main reason why Du Jialuo can't awaken his bloodline. De Bao was now completely confused. He didn't know what Lu Ping was planning to do, so he could only flatter him. This kind of situation, I'm afraid only an alchemy grandmaster like Boss would be able to see through it. The cultivator from the Ying Tian faction responsible for awakening the young man's bloodline probably doesn't even know what's going on. No, he knows what's going on. Lu Ping's gaze suddenly became cold, and De Bao suddenly felt a bone-piercing chill. However, he heard Lu Ping continue, to be able to activate the young man's bloodline awakening ceremony, the cultivator must at least be at the core forging stage. As an alchemy grandmaster, how could he not know the effect of a treasure that strengthens the body on a mortal? Lu Ping glanced at De Bao, and his cold gaze caused De Bao to shiver. Then, he heard Lu Ping continue, De Bao, all these years you've been browsing through the human race's ancient books, and your knowledge has increased a lot. However, you're still far from it. In the alchemy world, there's an extremely famous but rarely mentioned pill. I wonder if you've heard of it. De Bao could no longer keep up with Lu Ping's jumping thoughts, so he could only follow Lu Ping's words and ask, "Boss, what pill is it?" "Mortal pill." De Bao instantly felt a wave of cold air penetrate from his spine straight into his head, and it immediately exploded. His brain was filled with ice shards. "Boss, you're talking about that kid?" Lu Ping nodded his head and said, "It's just a mortal spell. It seems like Ying Tian faction has Dharma Laozu in charge, and that kid's surname Du's bloodline that strengthens the body was discovered by the alchemy grandmasters of Ying Tian faction during the bloodline awakening ceremony. However, they lied to him, saying that it was because of this kid's innate divine strength that caused his bloodline to be unable to communicate with the spirit. I'm afraid that this kid will be refined into a mortal pill by the alchemy grandmasters of Ying Tian faction, and then fed to the sect's Dharma Laozu to strengthen his body and resist the Dharma tribulation." The multicolored robe transformed into a white cloud and slowly floated down from the peak of Heavenly Mountain. For once, De Bao was obedient and quiet. Lu Ping said faintly, "What did you find about the Ying Tian dojo in the records of the history of Ying Tian faction?" De Bao pondered for a moment, then answered, "That was a conversation between a disciple of Ying Tian faction and a Laozu." The disciple asked, "If the sect is in disarray, where can we find the dojo?" That Laozu replied, "The water of the Ying River comes from the heavens." Then, the disciple said, "Good." Lu Ping nodded his head and said, "Originally, we were thinking of this Heaven Mountain. This is where the Ying Tian faction used to be, so it is naturally the most likely place to hide the Ying Tian dojo. However, for thousands of years, countless cultivators have used countless methods to search this place, but they have still come up empty-handed. It is obvious that there is no way that the Ying Tian dojo can hide on this Heaven Mountain. Of course, even if it really exists, it is not something we can find. However, I believe that the Ying Tian dojo is not on this Heaven Mountain." This time, De Bao finally caught up with Lu Ping's train of thought. He nodded his head and said, "Boss is right." Then, in the mountain range where the Ying Tian faction used to dominate half of the northern plains, there should be another mountain called Heaven Mountain or something related to Heaven Mountain standing beside the Ying River. Lu Ping put away the multicolored cloud-light robe. Lu Ping and De Bao suddenly appeared at the foot of Heaven Mountain's lone peak under the dumbfounded gazes of the cultivators from the three sections. De Bao stretched out his hand and threw another low-grade spirit stone into Du Jialuo's hand. He said, "Hey, kid with the surname Du, have you rested well? If you have, then quickly set sail over there. Let's first circle around this Heaven Mountain." After Lu Ping and Du Jialua left on the small boat, 3 streaks of light descended from the mountainside. The streaks of light faded away, revealing the figures of 3 core forging cultivators. The person in the lead looked at the small boat that was disappearing into the distance. No one knew what he was thinking. Behind him, a cultivator wearing a short-sleeved tight robe asked, "Brother Kai, did you notice anything wrong with those 2? The cultivator in the lead shook his head and said, "Brother Huang, you must be joking. I'm very ashamed. Those 2's strength is far above mine. They easily escaped from my surveillance." Brother Huang smiled and said, "Brother Kai, don't worry about it. There are many high-level cultivators who have infiltrated the Sky Mountain ruins. We don't even know many of them have entered." At this time, another cultivator also said, "Brother Kai, do you think those 2 found something on Heaven Mountain's lone peak?" Brother Kai shook his head and said, "Brother Zhangyu, that's impossible. If they really found something, they wouldn't have left so easily." The 3 of them talked for a while more before Brother Huang and Brother Zhangyu returned to the mountainside. Brother Kai waved his hand and called Kai Yun over. He asked, "That kid hasn't shown any unusual behavior recently, right?" Kai Yun smiled and said, "Third uncle, he's just a lucky mortal. What can he find? He's still doing normal ferrying and fishing. Also, his old mother seems to have fallen ill recently. Many doctors have failed to cure her. The kid is currently earning spirit stones, and it seems he wants to ask our sect's disciples for help. Brother Kai waved his hand and said, just in case, no matter who he asks for help from, go to his house and cure his old mother. Give her some pills to strengthen her body. In the future, when the kid goes missing, go to his house and leave some money for his widowed mother. It can be considered a good reputation for our sect. Kai Yun nodded and said, don't worry, third uncle. Nephew will definitely take care of this matter. Kai Yun hesitated for a moment before asking again, third uncle, what happened to that kid? Is he worth your personal attention? Brother Kai's expression turned serious and he said in a low voice, there are some things that you shouldn't know. You only need to know that our sect's Laozu has personally taken care of this matter. Kai Yun was startled and he lowered his head, not daring to ask any more questions. Above the Ying River, Lu Ping was resting with his eyes closed. De Bao couldn't stay still, so he began to chat with Du Jialua. Oh, you're saying that the cultivator with the surname Kai was one of the cultivators who presided over the bloodline awakening ceremony for the children in your village? Du Jialua nodded and said, that's right. That immortal Kai came with his third uncle. At that time, all the cultivators listened to his third uncle. I, immortal Kai, am the best. He used immortal techniques to help the village do a lot of things. Everyone still remembers his kindness. De Bao looked in Lu Ping's direction and saw Lu Ping opening his eyes thoughtfully. He murmured, strange, strange. From what I can see, this celestial mountain's peak is already the highest peak in the Yingtian mountain range. Could it be that there is a special peak in the Ying River? Du Jialua blinked and said, Immortal, there is something you don't know. Although this celestial mountain's peak is tall, it is not the highest peak in the Yingtian mountain range. Oh. There was a flash of light in Lu Ping's eyes. He smiled gently and said, Celestial Mountain's peak is so tall that it pierces the clouds. With my eyesight, I can see hundreds of miles away. However, I haven't seen a peak taller than Celestial Mountain's peak. Chapter 626. Du Jialua said in a serious tone, in fact, there is a mountain 200 kilometers away that is even higher than the solitary peak of the heavenly mountain. It's just that this mountain is too high. The top of the mountain is covered in ice and snow all year round, and it's surrounded by clouds and mist. Under normal circumstances, this mountain can't be seen. Without waiting for Lu Ping to ask, De Bao impatiently asked, Snow Mountain? That'll be fun. Do you know the location of this mountain? Du Jialua pointed to the Ying River under his feet and said, the meltwater of the Snow Mountain is the source of the Ying River. De Bao's face lit up, but he heard Lu Ping calmly ask, do you know the name of the Snow Mountain? The Silent Peak. The old people have a saying, if you don't dare speak loudly, you'll startle the people in heaven. This is the Silent Peak. Because it's so high, people believe that it's closest to the celestial realm in heaven. If someone speaks loudly from the top, they might disturb the celestial realm and be punished by the celestial realm. At the end of the Ying River was the Silent Speech Peak, which was covered by thick white clouds all year round. Therefore, after being tens of miles away from the peak, people could only see a mass of clouds instead of the towering snow-capped mountains. Two streaks of light streaked across the sky and crashed straight into the white clouds, disappearing without a trace. Boss, I didn't expect your talisman crafting skills to be so high. But why did you give a talisman to that kid? De Bao recalled that after the two of them learned of the Silent Peak's existence, Lu Ping gave Du Jialua a golden talisman he made after advancing to the late core forging stage. He said, Kid, it's your opportunity to take us on a tour of the Ying River. Keep this talisman well. If your life is in danger, just tear this talisman and it might save your life. However, eldest brother, did you really need to give him a late core forging talisman? If I'm not mistaken, that talisman should have sealed the true essence sword chi inside. With your current strength, if you activate that talisman, even an early core forging cultivator would die if they were caught off guard, right? But that kid doesn't have any spiritual energy, so how could he activate it? Lu Ping smiled. Do you know what I used to earn spirit stones to cultivate when I was in the blood refining stage? Before DeBeo could ask, Lu Ping continued, yes, charm crafting. Although I haven't been focusing on charm crafting for the past few years, my craftsmanship hasn't fallen too far behind. A few days ago, I learned a storage charm from Martial Uncle Xian Zhu. It allows me to store a strand of my true essence into it. So, I fused the storage charm with the true essence One Chi sword treasure. As long as that kid isn't too stupid and can tear the charm in time, the true essence in the storage charm will naturally activate the true essence One Chi sword treasure. Hiss. DeBeo sucked in a mouthful of cold air and said, how did you fuse two talismans? You should know that the power of a talisman varies from person to person. The power of a talisman can never be compared to the power of the talisman maker's own true essence. But your talisman, no matter who uses it, can maintain the power of the talisman. If Martial Uncle Xian Zhu knew about this, I'm afraid he would be as crazy as Lao Tzu when he saw the Na Chuan cauldron, right? On the summit of the wordless peak, the biting cold wind was not only cold but also fierce. The cold wind was like a small knife constantly cutting people's skin. Fortunately, Lu Ping and DeBeo were core forging stage cultivators, so they could naturally ignore the cold wind. The bare mountain top was left with only ice and snow, accompanied only by the howling cold wind. Big brother, have you found any traces of a hidden space? Lu Ping's eyes flickered with a green light. The power of the 3 pure true pupils that had fused with 5 kinds of water attribute treasures was even more powerful. However, Lu Ping circled around the wordless peak for a long time, but he still couldn't find any traces of a hidden space. Lu Ping pondered for a moment, then his eyes lit up and said, come, let's go to the source of the abundant river. The two descended the mountain and followed the main stream of the abundant river towards the wordless peak. Following the abundant river, the source was actually formed by many tributaries. Lu Ping and DeBeo only followed the largest of the tributaries, until they arrived at a slope covered by a vast layer of ice. Looking at the clear flowing water under the ice, DeBeo touched his mustache and asked in confusion, Big brother, what can we find here? Not hearing Lu Ping's answer, DeBeo couldn't help but raise his head to look at Lu Ping. He saw that Lu Ping was looking at the border of the ice field and the ground not far away. DeBeo followed Lu Ping's gaze and saw a pile of rubble. Lu Ping strode towards it with DeBeo following closely behind without saying a word. When the two got closer, they saw a pile of rubble. It looked like a collapsed temple, but also like an abandoned altar. Lu Ping pointed at the source of the abundant river under the ice. A column of water rose from the ice and fell directly on the pile of rubble. It washed away the rubble and even pushed away the soil by more than a foot. When the column of water disappeared, only a 3-foot-tall stone platform was left on the ground. There might have been some kind of inscription on the stone platform, but it had long since disappeared. However, the stone platform that had just been washed by the abundant river didn't have a single drop of water on it. As expected, there was something fishy. Lu Ping carefully looked at the stone platform and suddenly heard DeBeo shout from the other side of the stone platform, Big brother, look over here. When Lu Ping rushed over, he saw a rough groove carved on a section of the stone platform. Lu Ping didn't know why, but he felt that the groove, which looked like a mold, was unusually familiar. He must have seen it somewhere before. Lu Ping was excited. His intuition couldn't be wrong. He must have an item on him that was about the same size as this groove. It was something that Lao Tzu left behind in the past. Perhaps it was the key to opening the Yingtian dojo. However, this item was obviously not very eye-catching, so Lu Ping didn't have a deep impression of it. However, after Lu Ping rummaged through the items he found in the cave and cave dwelling in the interspatial ring, he still couldn't find anything. This result made Lu Ping a little discouraged. At this time, DeBeo seemed to have thought of something and whispered, Big brother, in the underwater cave, I once found a clay pot that Lao Tzu used to store top-grade spiritual tea. Lu Ping slapped his forehead and suddenly realized something. He took out a gray clay pot from his storage ring. This clay pot was a psychic magic weapon. However, to Lu Ping's amusement, this magic weapon didn't have any attack or defense functions. It didn't even have any other auxiliary functions such as storage, and spirit gathering. The only function it had was preservation. That's right, preservation. When Lu Ping got this clay pot, he secretly sighed at Lao Tzu's extravagance. In the North Sea, no Lao Tzu would spend time and energy to create such a boring psychic magic weapon, let alone spend precious spiritual materials to refine such a kind of psychic magic weapon. In this situation, perhaps only a cultivator born in a big sect in the central region would have the leisure to make such a magic weapon when he was bored. However, after Lu Ping got this clay pot, he often put spiritual tea, spiritual herb seeds, and other items into this magic weapon. At least, when Yu collected a large number of spiritual herb seeds that were extinct or about to be extinct in the cultivation world from the Sea of Flowers in the secret land of the Fallen Mountain, she stored all kinds of spiritual herb seeds in this clay pot, and then planted them in the spiritual herb garden in the House of Gold. Lu Ping put the clay pot into the groove. The result of the perfect fit made Lu Ping and Debao's eyes light up. The 3-foot-high stone platform suddenly shook, and a large number of dense lines suddenly appeared on the cross-section of the stone platform. Starting from the mouth of the clay pot, they instantly covered the whole stone platform. Just when the two were waiting for a miracle to happen, the stone platform suddenly stopped shaking, and the lines on the surface of the stone platform gradually disappeared. Lu Ping and Debao looked at each other. The clay pot was still placed in the hidden groove, intact. Lu Ping looked at the gradually disappearing lines, and finally, his eyes fixed on the hidden groove where the lines were the most concentrated. Debao was at a loss as he watched Lu Ping take the clay pot out of the hidden groove, and then put the clay pot into the water that had melted under the ice to fill it up. Then, he put the clay pot back into the hidden groove. Rumble. Amidst the violent shaking, the lines on the surface of the stone platform appeared again. The water from the clay pot flowed along the mouth of the clay pot, and the fine lines engraved on the stone platform overflowed. Then, it continued to extend along these lines. The stone platform, which was originally unstained by the water from the clay pot, was soon soaked by the water from the clay pot. The stone platform shook more and more violently, and the clay pot placed in the groove suddenly began to rotate. The space at the mouth of the clay pot suddenly began to distort, and Debao, who was looking down carefully, jumped back in fright. The range of the spatial distortion gradually expanded, and gradually, it formed a spatial door big enough for a person to enter and exit. Then, the door seemed to have reached its limit, and began to shrink again. Lu Ping patted Debao's shoulder and said, "Hurry up." After speaking, he was the first to jump into the spatial door. Debao's expression was absent-minded for a moment. When he saw that the door was about to shrink to the point where he could no longer enter, he let out a strange cry, closed his eyes, and jumped in. The spatial door continued to shrink until it became a distorted space again, and then gradually calmed down. However, at this time, there was no longer a gray clay pot on the stone platform, only a bare stone platform that seemed to be wet with dew. From a distance, it looked somewhat strange. In an unknown space, Debao, who had fallen on his butt, got up from the ground and rubbed his fat butt. He asked Lu Ping, who was standing in front of him, "Boss, is this the Yingtian dojo?" Amidst the colorful flowing lights, Lu Ping sighed and said, "Debao, I'm afraid we won't have much to gain this time." Chapter 627. Debao was still captivated by the colorful scene in front of him. When he heard Lu Ping's words, he asked in confusion, "Boss, why is that?" Lu Ping pointed at the colorful scene and said, "These are the prohibitions of the Yingtian dojo." After the Ying-Tian sect activated the sect-protecting formation and hid the true legacy dojo in the void, every link of the formation in the dojo was covered by prohibitions. That's why the scene in front of us is like this. If we want to gain something from this dojo, we have to break the prohibitions covering it one by one. Dabeo scratched his head and said, "Boss, although these prohibitions were formed after the sect-protecting formation of the Ying-Tian sect was activated, and the difficulty of breaking them is extremely high, there are still relatively easy prohibitions that can be broken. Furthermore, you have quite a bit of experience in breaking prohibitions. No matter what, you can't return empty-handed, right?" Lu Ping said impatiently, "Don't forget about Qingjian Laozu. He is Laozu at the early Dharma stage. No matter how good I am at breaking prohibitions, I am only a late core forging adept. Some of the prohibitions that I can break can be destroyed by Dharma Laozu with brute force. Since Qingjian Laozu is the successor of the Ying-Tian sect, he must have entered the Ying-Tian dojo many times. He must have broken all the prohibitions that can be broken and obtained everything that can be obtained. As for the prohibitions that he can't break, I'm afraid we won't be able to break them either." When Dabeo heard Lu Ping say this, he looked a little dejected. However, he quickly recovered and said, "The inheritances of the Ying-Tian sect that we found in the cave must have been obtained by Qingjian Laozu from the Ying-Tian dojo. No matter what, they are still in our hands. Boss, just the 3 complete sets of inherited techniques in your hands is enough to make this trip worthwhile. No matter what, we still have to come and take a look. At least the spirit herbs in this dojo have been growing for 3,000 to 4,000 years. This space is full of spirit energy, so most of the spirit herbs must have matured. There should be some 3,000 year spirit herbs as well." Looking at the lush spirit herb garden on the ground, Lu Ping, Samling, Lu Qiner, and Lu Dague were all focused on collecting spirit herbs. Only Dabeo looked miserably at the colorful prohibitions in the distance. At this moment, Dabeo had already sensed the aura of several treasures and pointed them out to Lu Ping one by one. But Lu Ping could only sigh helplessly as he looked at the buildings that were covered by the prohibitions. The treasures were right in front of him, but he could not obtain them. To Dabeo, this was undoubtedly a form of torture. The absent-minded Dabeo quickly tore off 4 to 5 stalks of 1,000-year spirit herbs. One of them was even a 3,000-year spirit herb that was often used to refine Dharma pills. Lu Ping was instantly enraged and scolded, "Dabeo, what are you doing?" Lu Qiner was also someone who could not sit still. Seeing that Lu Ping was angry at Dabeo, she immediately walked over to Dabeo with a smile and tried to pull his mustache. Dabeo was so frightened that he retreated a few steps and tried to use the earth escape technique to escape. This was originally Dabeo's usual trick, but he had forgotten that this Ying-Tian dojo was the final inheritance ground of the Ying-Tian faction. There were countless prohibitions intertwined, so how could he use the earth escape technique? Dabeo stood up from the ground, clutching his forehead. However, there was now a large bruise on his forehead. Lu Qiner couldn't help but laugh at this sight. At this time, Dabeo could not care less about the pain on his head. Instead, he excitedly said to Lu Ping, "Boss, I found something. The soil here is mixed with the growing soil." Lu Ping rolled his eyes at him and said, "You don't have to say that. Otherwise, how could the spirit herbs grow so luxuriantly here without any supervision? Even if the spirit qi in this dojo was abundant, such a situation would not occur." Dabeo chuckled and suddenly condensed a ball of yellow true essence in his hands. Then, with a flip of his hands, the true essence scattered evenly like raindrops into an area with a radius of nearly 200 feet. Then, with a solemn expression, Dabeo placed one of his palms on the ground, as if he was feeling something. Only Lu Ping's 3 pure eyes could see that there was a continuous flow of true essence in Dabeo's palms that was scattering in all directions, resonating with the yellow true essence that had been scattered into the ground earlier. After about the time it took to drink half a cup of tea, Dabeo suddenly let out a low shout and slowly lifted his palms from the ground. Looking at the strenuous expression on Debao's face, it was as if this hand was lifting a huge rock. The yellow true essence in an area with a radius of nearly 200 feet constantly converged towards Debao's raised palms. At the same time, along with the true essence, there were also wisps of smoke and dust. Only Lu Ping could vaguely see these tiny wisps of dust with the help of his 3 pure eyes. Hundreds of wisps of dust gradually converged under Debao's palms. First, it was the size of a bean, then it gradually grew to the size of a finger, then it gradually grew to the size of an egg, and finally, it grew to the size of half a fist. At this time, Lu Ping could no longer see the wisps of dust carried by the returning true essence. The half-fist-sized wisps of dust gradually condensed and shrank back to the size of a finger. Impressively, it was a small piece of growing soil. Debao proudly handed this small piece of growing soil to Lu Ping. Lu Ping held the growing soil and looked at it for a moment. He said, "It's very pure, and the quality is extremely high. I didn't think that after advancing to the core forging stage, Debao would actually have such an ability." Debao became more and more proud of himself. Lu Qiner didn't miss this opportunity and said, "Debao is awesome. Look at this spirit grass garden, it's only a few hundred feet in radius. Quickly condense a few more pieces of growing soil." When Debao heard this, his complexion suddenly collapsed. Condensing the growing soil was an innate ability that he had obtained after advancing to the core forging stage. However, every time he used this innate ability, it would almost consume all of Debao's true essence. How could he have any spare energy to use it a second time? Debao looked at Lu Ping with a pleading gaze. He saw that Lu Ping had taken out a jade crystal bottle and said, "Inside this bottle is a amethyst vitality augmenting pill. It's a pill that I modified using amethyst honey to restore true essence. Take it and restore your true essence as soon as possible. Since it's impossible for us to have too many harvests, then we must refine all of the growing soil in this spirit grass garden." Debao pitifully took the jade crystal bottle from Lu Ping's hands. Seeing Lu Ping's stone-hearted expression, he could only sigh. He poured out a sweet and fragrant pill from the jade crystal bottle, swallowed it, and began to refine it. In the blink of an eye, Lu Ping and the others had stayed in the Yingtian dojo for 2 days. During these 2 days, Debao once again displayed his innate ability, condensing a second piece of growing soil the size of a thumb, and gave it to Lu Ping. At this time, Lu Ping was standing in front of a building that was covered by the light of a restriction spell. After 3 days of investigation, Lu Ping had finally found 5 areas where the power of the restriction spell was the weakest. Perhaps because these 5 areas were hidden very well, and Qingjian Laozu was obviously not very good at breaking restrictions, they were not found and broken by Qingjian Laozu. However, Lu Ping believed that he only had a 20% to 30% chance of breaking the restriction spell in these 5 areas, even if he went all out. At this moment, there was a sudden explosion behind him. Lu Ping suddenly turned around and saw Debao running over excitedly, shouting loudly, "Boss, come and see what I found." Lu Ping's heart skipped a beat, and he turned around to follow Debao. Lu Ping looked at the cave in front of him and asked curiously, "How did you find this place?" It turned out that when Debao was preparing to condense the growing soil in the spiritual herb garden for the 3rd time, he suddenly discovered that the spiritual energy in a corner was a little weak. That corner was an area that Qingjian Laozu had opened up after they entered the dojo. Lu Ping originally thought that even if there were treasures there, they would have already been plundered by Qingjian Laozu, so he did not carefully investigate it. Unexpectedly, Debao found some clues here. When Lu Ping arrived, Samling and Lu Qiner had already worked together to break the restriction spell at the entrance of the cave. The structure of this restriction spell was relatively simple, and it was not connected to the other restrictions. It seemed to have been set up temporarily, but it was broken so easily. A familiar spiritual energy fluctuation came from the cave. Lu Ping was surprised with a trace of disappointment, and he said, "A spirit stone vein?" I didn't expect a spirit stone vein to move into this Ingtian dojo, but we can't take this vein away. Dabeo was most fond of treasures that contained spiritual energy, such as spirit stones. After Lu Ping confirmed that this was a spirit stone vein, he could not wait any longer and said, "Boss, let's go down and take a look first." Lu Ping pondered for a moment and said, "All right." Spirit stone veins could be regenerated, but the regeneration period was extremely long. 3,000 to 4,000 years would be enough for this spirit stone vein to return to its original state. Lu Ping and his 6 spiritual pets worked together. 2 hours later, they looked at the small pile of spirit stones in front of them. Lu Ping took out the few high-grade spirit stones and said, "Looks like this is a medium-sized spirit stone vein." Although the ratio of high-grade spirit stones is not as good as the one on Frost Island, it's still not bad. Unfortunately, if Guo Tianshan Laozu also came to the Middle Earth, with his current ability to move mountains and fill seas, he could work together with Jiang Tianlin Laozu and senior uncle Xianchen, who is a formation grandmaster. Then, they might be able to move this medium-sized spirit stone vein. We are powerless to do anything at the moment. Dabeo wanted to dig in the spirit stone vein first, but time was limited. With Lu Ping's current net worth, he did not care about the tens of millions of spirit stones, so he asked Lu Qiner to pull Dabeo's beard and pull him out of the spirit stone vein. After Dabeo handed the third piece of breathing soil to Lu Ping had already surveyed the area where the restriction fluctuation was the weakest. He already had a plan in mind, so he called all 6 spiritual pets over, and then directly flicked a drop of core forging stage royal jelly into Dabeo's mouth. This drop of royal jelly made Dabeo's chubby face red, and allowed him to quickly recover his Zhenyuan. After thinking for a while, Lu Ping also called out the Amethyst Bee King, Zilan. Lu Ping could not dissolve the restriction invisibly, so he could only use a 2-pronged method of cracking and breaking. Therefore, Lu Ping could only gather everyone's strength and try to increase the power of breaking by force. Chapter 628. The restriction that Lu Ping and the others were facing was emitting a rainbow-colored light. Lu Ping's hands formed a series of hand seals. Rays of blue and purple light flashed in his hands and then shot towards the rainbow-colored restriction. As Lu Ping cast out the hand seals, the light on the barrier's surface gradually weakened. First, it turned into 6 colors, then 5, then 4, and finally, when it reached 3 colors, it finally stopped moving. "Now!" Lu Ping shouted, and the 3 spirits reacted first. As if they had a telepathic connection, they used the wind to strengthen the water and the water to form ice. The wind whip, water halberd, and ice arrow all rushed towards the tricolored seal at the same time. After Samling consumed the heart-dissolving pill refined by Lu Ping, he was now at the 3rd layer of core forging. Samling was a top-rank demonic beast. Even a 5th or 6th layer core forging cultivator wouldn't dare to underestimate this attack. After the explosion, the 3-colored restriction became a lot dimmer. However, in the end, it wasn't able to reduce the 3-colored restriction to only 2 colors. At this time, Lu Qin also made her move. Lu Qin had already advanced to the 4th stage of core forging, and after refining the wind and fire dual attribute spirit items, her strength had increased tremendously. This time, she deliberately let the 3 spirits attack first because she wanted to see how strong she had become. A pair of flywheels suddenly appeared in Lu Qiner's hands. One was azure and the other was fiery red. The 2 wind wheels smashed into the restriction one after the other. Finally, the 3-colored restriction was reduced to 2 colors. Lu Qiner giggled and proudly looked at Samling. At this time, Lu Dague's attack arrived. A huge fist condensed in the sky. Then, he used his own life treasure refined from his tortoiseshell to form a glove and fiercely smashed down. Although it looked very powerful, in reality, it was not as powerful as any one of the Samling. As for Debeo, he barely managed to shoot out an earthen yellow true essence, which condensed into a boulder in midair and smashed into the light screen. It could be considered as doing his best. Although Debeo and Dague were both at the first layer of core forging, the difference in strength between Debeo and Dague was too great. Just before the boulder fell from the sky, a sound like the gurgling of water soared into the sky. A huge silver sword slashed down. Puchi. As if chopping melons and vegetables, the remaining two colored lights were suddenly cut down. Then, a sound like silk ripping could be heard. The thing hidden behind the restriction finally appeared in front of Lu Ping and the others. After Lu Ping refined the Changlu sword, it showed great power. It was worthy of being a spirit-nourishing treasure with 8 treasured restrictions. Its power was many times more tyrannical than the golden scale sword. With just one strike, it completely broke the restriction. Unfortunately, the Changlu sword and the thin water sword formed a set of dual flying swords. This was the only way to display the true power of the Changlu sword. Now, Lu Ping could only use the Changlu sword as a single sword. Although its power was still tyrannical, it was not able to display the full potential of the Changlu sword. Lu Ping had a strange expression as he looked at the bronze furnace in front of him. Was this another incense burner? Compared to the small stone cauldron Lu Ping found in the stone room that was used to control the cave dwelling's array formation, this copper cauldron was much bigger. But Lu Ping didn't know why this incense cauldron was placed here. When Lu Ping opened the incense burner, he was a little surprised. The incense burner was made from a spirit material called fiery wind copper. Although the fiery wind copper was not as precious as the thousand sand copper, it was still a common material used to forge high-grade cauldrons and mystic instruments. But in Ing Tian's sect, it was forged into an incense burner. There was still a large amount of incense left in the incense burner. Lu Ping picked it up and sniffed it. He found that it was a large amount of soul-calming incense. Although soul-calming incense was not as expensive as soul-calming incense, it was still a consumable used by high-grade cultivators to aid their cultivation. Lu Ping had seen this incense in Lu Tianling's Chonghua Palace before, but that was after Lu Tianling and Laozu entered the transcendent stage. Lu Ping held the incense burner in his hand and looked at it. He found that there was a drawer-like object at the bottom of each of the 4 sides of the incense burner. Lu Ping's eyes lit up and he opened the first drawer expectantly. There were 25 pieces of soul-calming incense neatly arranged inside. Although there were not many of them, each of them was very heavy. After igniting them, they could burn for 7 days. They were suitable for a cultivator to use during a long period of seclusion. Lu Ping opened the second drawer and saw a total of 20 pieces of calming soul incense. However, these 20 incense sticks were much larger than the 30 he had before. Each incense stick could burn for 7 days. Obviously, they were also prepared for long-term closed-door cultivation. Lu Ping opened the second drawer and saw 20 pieces of calming soul incense. Lu Ping looked at the third drawer expectantly. Among the precious spices commonly used in the cultivation world, the soul-calming incense and soul-nurturing incense were the most famous. Among the 3, the soul-calming incense was the least effective. The soul-calming incense was a notch better than the soul-calming incense. The most valuable was the soul-nurturing incense. Not only was the soul-nurturing incense more effective than the soul-calming incense in gathering one's consciousness, nourishing one's divine will and healing injuries, but the soul-nurturing incense also had many rare benefits for a cultivator's divine will. With a glimmer of hope, Lu Ping opened the third drawer. As expected, there were 12 pieces of soul-nurturing incense inside. Lu Ping was overjoyed. The soul-nurturing incense was highly sought after by some Dharma adepts in the cultivation world. It was said that the soul-nurturing incense had an obvious effect on stabilizing, strengthening, and recovering one's Dharma power. Although what he found in the first 3 drawers was unexpected, Lu Ping felt that it was worth it. What was in the last drawer? Among the precious spices in the cultivation world, although these 3 spices were the most famous and had the most uses, it did not mean that these 3 spices were the most valuable. In the cultivation world, there were some spices that were not as widely used as these 3 spices, but they had unique effects that were amazing. Lu Ping opened the 4th drawer with a heart full of anticipation. However, his enthusiasm was met with a bucket of cold water. Incense ash. How could he have forgotten about this? Lu Ping smiled bitterly and shook his head. This drawer was used to store the incense ash left after the spices were burned. Lu Ping put away the incense burner and then looked at the area where the restriction had been opened. It was obviously a relatively remote corner. Except for the incense burner in the corner, the other places were empty and there was nothing else. No wonder the restriction here was the weakest. The 6 spiritual pets, who had launched their strongest attacks, rested for a moment to recover the inner yuan in their bodies. Then, they followed Lu Ping to the second restriction that looked weaker. This time, Lu Ping had only broken 3 of the colorful restrictions. Samling and Lu Qiner had only broken 1 when they joined forces. The remaining Dabao, Dugue, and the amethyst wasp King Zilan had only barely destroyed half of the colorful lights. However, what surprised Lu Ping and the others was that the 49 stingers sent out by the amethyst wasp King Zilan had a special effect on breaking restrictions. The half of the light that the 3 of them had destroyed was mostly thanks to Zilan. Unfortunately, the amethyst wasp king's cultivation was too low. It was not even comparable to Dabao. Otherwise, Zilan might have become Lu Ping's secret weapon to break the restriction of Yingtian Dojo. However, this was already enough. The long stream sword once again turned into a gurgling stream of water, and then into a monstrous wave that surged into the sky. Wave after wave, the long stream sword smashed 1.5 rays of colorful light in one fell swoop. Then, the landslide sword fell with the force of a thunderbolt, smashing the last ray of colorful light until it was on the verge of collapse. This was not the end of it. Before the Changlu sword could be retracted, the golden scale sword had already streaked across the sky with a golden shadow, becoming the last straw that crushed the restriction. After the restriction was broken, Lu Ping shouted, "Oh no!" It turned out that Lu Ping did not know the depth of the restriction's protection just now. After breaking the last colorful light restriction, the golden scale sword did not stop. It passed through the restriction and smashed a house that was protected by the restriction into pieces. The moment the restriction was broken, there was a loud bang, and the house became a pile of ruins. Lu Ping looked at the several jade slips that had been smashed by the sword qi in the ruins. He did not know how many inheritances could not be obtained because of this sword. Lu Ping and the 7 pets dug through the ruins and found a total of 58 jade slips. Among them, 27 were directly shattered by Lu Ping's sword qi or were smashed when the house collapsed. The remaining 31 jade slips were intact. Similar to the inheritance of the Yingtian faction found in Laozu's cave abode in the clear stream, the contents of the inheritance in these 31 jade slips were more extensive. It involved cultivation, magic arts, secret techniques, alchemy, weapon refinement, talisman making, puppet making, and many other aspects. However, each aspect was only a part, and the contents were not complete. It was obvious that there were other places of inheritance. Only by gathering all these jade slips together and sorting them out would one be able to obtain the complete inheritance. Looking at the 27 jade slips that had shattered on the ground, Lu Ping sighed. He did not know if the contents of these shattered jade slips were important or if they would have a great impact on the complete inheritance system of the Yingtian faction. Not bothering to browse through the contents of the inheritance jade slips that he had obtained, Lu Ping hurriedly walked towards the next location. This time, while Lu Ping was breaking the restriction, he discovered that this restriction could actually borrow the power of ice from the entire Yingtian faction's formation. Lu Ping immediately activated the red spirit flame. Under the activation of Lu Ping's true yuan, the earth high-grade spiritual fire of heaven and earth suddenly exploded into a ball of red light. Under Lu Ping's control, the red light transformed into a strange burning dragon. It circled around the restriction that was emitting the power of ice. After roasting it for half a day, the restriction was finally completely broken. In the grassland behind the restriction, Debeo dug out 3 jade boxes that had the spirit sealing talisman stuck on them. However, he did not find anything else after that. Chapter 629. He didn't think that the Yingtian sect didn't have this kind of hobby. Lu Ping thought about it and decided to open the 3 boxes with the spirit sealing talismans to take a look. Lu Ping carefully opened the spirit sealing talisman on the first box. After opening it, his eyebrows jumped up. This was a practitioner weapon. Lu Ping played with this practitioner weapon for a while. This was a mountain-moving practitioner weapon. After using it, it could press the weight of a small mountain on the opponent's body, greatly limiting the opponent's movement. This would allow one to find a chance to defeat the enemy. It could be said that this was a very good practitioner weapon. Practitioner weapons were a type of talisman that only Transcendence stage cultivators could make, while talisman treasures were core forging stage cultivators who sealed their own spells in talismans. The difference between practitioner weapons and talisman treasures was not only because of the difference in the maker, but also because practitioner weapons were stronger than talisman treasures. The biggest difference was that talisman treasures could only be used 3 times before they became useless, while practitioner weapons could be used continuously. After using up the spells of the Transcendence stage cultivator sealed in the practitioner weapon, as long as the seal inscriptions in the practitioner weapon were not destroyed, the cultivator could continue to replenish their true yuan into the practitioner weapon. When the true yuan replenished reached a certain level, the practitioner weapon could be used again. Lu Ping had seen practitioner weapons on his junior sister Jiang Xianxian and the others before. Although the power of a practitioner weapon was stronger than a talisman treasure, with Lu Ping's current strength, as long as it wasn't a practitioner weapon that was personally activated by Transcendence Laozu, he wouldn't be too concerned. Lu Ping casually threw the practitioner weapon to Debeo. Among his 7 spiritual pets, only Debeo was an earth attribute demon beast. Naturally, this practitioner weapon would be able to display its greatest power in his hands. Debeo danced with joy as he held the practitioner weapon in his hand. Now, among the spiritual pets under Lu Ping, except for Debeo, the others already had their own natal magic weapons. Although Debeo had quite a few low-grade magic treasures that Lu Ping had discarded in the past, and some were spoils of war, he had followed Lu Ping for the longest time, so his vision and experience were naturally not low. How could ordinary magic treasures catch his eye? Thus, he wanted to beg Lu Ping to find a superior spiritual material for him and refine a most suitable natal magic treasure. But now that he had a talisman weapon in hand, Debeo's first layer core forging cultivation could temporarily alleviate the awkward situation of not having a life-bonded magic treasure and his own weak strength. When the second box was opened, Lu Ping's eyes lit up, and a trace of joy quietly crept up his brows. Restriction-breaking talisman. Lu Ping was feeling extremely regretful because he couldn't break the tyrannical restriction in the Yingtian dojo. Countless treasures were right in front of him, but he couldn't get his hands on them. He didn't expect that a restriction-breaking talisman would immediately appear in front of Lu Ping. Lu Ping had also obtained a restriction-breaking talisman from the auction, but it was the lowest kind of restriction-breaking talisman. At that time, Lu Ping only used it to open the seal of the mysterious purple jade slip that he obtained from Fei Ling Island. This restriction-breaking talisman was emitting 5 colors, and it was unknown how many levels higher than the talisman that Lu Ping had seen before. With this talisman in hand, Lu Ping was confident that he could break the restriction that he had previously sighed at. Perhaps, he would be able to obtain some surprising harvest from it. What would be in the third box? Counting one's own harvest was undoubtedly an exciting thing, not to mention that when these harvests were obtained, there was more or less a lot of suspense mixed in. Lu Ping looked at the 7-colored talisman in the box in disbelief. The 7-colored restriction-breaking talisman was said to be a top-grade talisman that could be broken by any cultivator, as long as it wasn't a spirit transformation realm expert that had reached the true spirit realm. If Debao's previous statement that Xianju Daoist had heard that Lu Ping had fused the storage talisman with the talisman treasure, greatly increasing the talisman treasure's power, then if Lu Ping had given this 7-colored restriction-breaking talisman to Xianju Daoist, then not only would Xianju Daoist be killed, but the pavilion master of the Zhenling Talisman Pavilion, Tian Shuelaozu, would also be killed. He never thought that the Ying Tian sect would have this kind of talisman passed down. The inheritance of a large sect with a long history was truly not a small matter. Lu Ping placed the 2 talismans back into the box. Then, he carefully stuck the spirit sealing talisman on the box and solemnly placed the 2 boxes back into his storage ring. The 4th 7-colored restriction was becoming more and more difficult to break. Lu Ping used all the seals he knew to break restrictions to the extreme, but his cultivation limited the power of the restriction. In the end, the 7-colored restriction only had 5 rays of light left. Even with the 7 spirit pets working together, they were only able to destroy 1 ray of light. Of the remaining 4 rays of light, 2 were destroyed by Lu Ping's flowing sword and golden scale sword. Then, the landslide came crashing down and destroyed another half-ray of light. Just when Debao and the others were feeling a little discouraged, they saw a sudden clap of thunder above Lu Ping's head. A thunderbolt fell down and shattered the remaining half-ray of light in one fell swoop. Debao cheered and was the first to run into the place that was previously sealed by the restriction. However, after a moment, Debao walked out dejectedly. He looked at Lu Ping bitterly and said, "Boss, go in and take a look. All the good stuff has been turned into charcoal by your thunderbolt." Lu Ping scolded in annoyance, but he still walked in. This was a half-buried building. There were many body parts made of various spiritual materials. There were also a few assembled into human or beast models. However, most of them had been turned into charcoal by the thunderbolt of the 7 treasure thunder calabash. Lu Ping said with some surprise, "This is the place to make puppets. Let's find out if there are any ancient books about making puppets." Everyone turned the building upside down. They almost broke every brick to see if there was anything hidden in the hollow bricks. Unfortunately, they still found nothing. Dugue, on the other hand, found a small, but complete puppet from a pile of broken puppet limbs. Lu Ping took the puppet and carefully examined it. He said with some surprise, "This puppet is made of second-class mutated spiritual materials. It seems the quality is quite good. No wonder it was intact after the thunderbolt. I don't know what use this puppet has." Lu Ping touched the back of the puppet's head and opened a hidden groove. He smiled and said, "It really is good. It actually needs a high-grade spirit stone to activate. Its power is no less than that of a core forging cultivator." As he spoke, he placed a high-grade spirit stone into the hidden groove. Following a series of creaking sounds, the puppet's body transformed into a 3-foot-tall silver pony. Surprisingly, there was a half-foot-long horn on the top of the pony's head. Because the puppet had not been refined, after Lu Ping used a high-grade spirit stone to activate it, the single-horned pony began to run around the house. Lu Ping thought for a moment and turned to look at the amethyst wasp queen. He saw the petite amethyst wasp queen Zilan flying out from a pile of rubble with a dusty face. In her hands was a book that was half the size of her. Lu Ping looked at the book in her arms and was happy. He smiled and said, "Little Zilan, how did you get yourself into such a mess?" However, after the purple crystal bee king flew out from the rubble, its eyes were immediately attracted by the single-horned horse that was running around in circles. With a cheer, it threw the big book in its arms to Lu Ping and landed on the horse. It excitedly pulled on the horse's reins and shouted, "Hiya, hiya." Lu Ping smiled and taught the purple crystal queen bee the method to refine puppets. He then gave her 50 high-grade spirit stones and let her ride the pony. Lu Ping looked at the large book in his hand with a rather strange expression. The Ying Tian sect's inheritance arrangements in the dojo were indeed a little strange. Putting aside the fact that they had messed up all the books and randomly scattered them, the dojo was obviously a place for making puppets. Yet, Lu Ping and the others found an inheritance book about making charms in the dojo. Lu Ping was speechless as he skimmed through the book. He found that it recorded some high-level talisman-making methods. What made Lu Ping happy and depressed was that he also found the method to make talisman-breaking talismans. Moreover, the inheritance of this talisman-making method was considered common among the big sects in the world of practice. Only those big sects with a long history would have the inheritance of a 5-colored talisman-breaking talisman. As for the inheritance of a complete 7-colored talisman-breaking talisman, only those big sects would have such a heritage. It could be said that although the Ying Tian sect's talisman inheritance book that Lu Ping had obtained was not complete, the value of the talisman-breaking talisman alone was comparable to a complete inherited technique that could be practiced to the late Dharma stage. However, what made Lu Ping a little frustrated was that the inheritance of this talisman-breaking talisman was extremely profound. It was not something that Lu Ping could master right now. Moreover, even if he had mastered the inheritance of the talisman-breaking talisman, with Lu Ping's current level of practice, he could only make a 4-colored talisman-breaking talisman. Moreover, to make a talisman was not something that could be completed in a short period of time. Although this kind of high-level talisman could not be compared to refining weapons, it would take a few days or even a month of effort to successfully make it. De Bao looked at the bright light that shot up into the sky from the 5th 7-colored talisman and said to Lu Ping with uncertainty, "Boss, why don't we use the 5-colored talisman-breaking talisman that you obtained earlier for this one?" Lu Ping shook his head and pointed at the training ground that was covered by countless talismans in the distance. He said, "We are still at the outermost area of the training ground, and the places that we see are usually only covered by 1 7-colored talisman. The other places that are covered by 2, 3, or even more talismans are obviously the more important areas of the Ying Tian sect. If we use this 5-colored talisman-breaking talisman on the outermost area, that would be too much of a waste." De Bao said with some disbelief, "No way, boss. You still want to go further in? That place is not like the outer areas that are just waiting for us to break the talismans. The talismans in that area are very complicated, and if we move one part, we might be attacked by the formation." Chapter 630. Although De Bao said that it was difficult, in reality, among Lu Ping and the others, he was the most obsessed with the treasures in the Ying Tian sect's training ground. When he heard that Lu Ping only had the confidence to open 5 restrictions, he secretly sighed. Unlike Lu Ping, when Lu Ping explored the Ying Tian sect's training ground, he first considered how to improve his own strength and whether it could be of help to Lu Ping's training ground in the future. Only then would he consider how to use the gains from the Ying Tian sect's training ground to strengthen Jinling. Otherwise, he would not have rushed to the northern ice plains from the North Sea before Jiang Tianlin and the other Dharma adepts of the North Sea arrived and entered the Ying Tian sect's training ground. On the other hand, De Bao was naturally interested in all kinds of treasures. He did not care whether some of the treasures would affect his training and strength, nor did he care about the use of these treasures. He only cared about the process of searching for the treasures and the treasures themselves. He only wanted to keep all the treasures for himself. This 5th rainbow restriction, under the guidance of Lu Ping, could only cut off 1 ray of light in the end. However, to Lu Ping's surprise, this time, the 7 spiritual pets actually managed to cut off 1 ray of light. This time, the greatest credit was due to the horn on the head of the puppet horse that the purple crystal queen bee was riding. After the purple crystal bee king shot out its 49 stingers, the puppet horse, under Zi-Lan's command, used its horn to collide with the 6th ray of light that had been mostly destroyed. Unexpectedly, the horn had some effect on breaking restrictions, and the puppet horse's attack was no weaker than the three spirits, so it was able to completely destroy the sixth ray of light in an instant. It was a pity that these restrictions were based on the formation. If they could not be broken by continuous attacks in the first place, then this restriction would quickly recover under the support of the formation of the Yingtian sect. The flowing sword, the golden scale sword, the netherwater sword, and the landslide sword hit the restrictive spell almost at the same time, but they were only able to extinguish two beams of colorful light. The Seven Treasures Thunder Calabash released another thunderbolt, and another beam of colorful light was destroyed. The remaining two rays of light were still shining brightly, as if mocking Lu Ping and the others for overestimating themselves. The seven spiritual pets all looked at Lu Ping with some disappointment, but they saw that a ninth-tier white jade lotus had risen under Lu Ping's feet. Around the white jade lotus, 12 fist-sized pearls exuding colorful light surrounded Lu Ping's body and slowly rotated around the white jade lotus. Lu Ping's expression was solemn. He slowly raised his hands, and the 12 gentian pearls around him rotated faster and faster. Then, Lu Ping suddenly pushed his hands forward and shouted, "God strike!" The 12 gentian pearls all collided with the two beams of colorful light, and in a moment, the remaining two beams of colorful light were smashed into pieces. Looking at Lu Ping, who had put the natal gentian formation back into the core space, the seven spiritual pets were inexplicably shocked. Lu Qiner was the fastest, jumping and shouting, "Brother, you are the best." Samling looked at Lu Ping with complete admiration, Dagui's eyes were wide open, and the amethyst queen bee on the puppet horse covered her mouth with her small hand, as if she was about to exclaim. De Bao smiled bitterly and said, "Boss, is this the power of your natal magic weapon? I didn't expect you to have such a trump card in your hand. No wonder you are confident not to use that restriction-breaking talisman. It's just that the power of this natal magic weapon is too great. Your Seven Treasures Thunder Gourd can only destroy one beam of colorful light, but this natal magic weapon can destroy two beams of colorful light so easily." Although Lu Ping's Zhenqi was abundant and almost invincible among cultivators in the same realm as him, Lu Ping had used the flowing sword, the golden scale sword, the water nether sword, the mountain crash, and the Seven Treasures Thunder Calabash almost at the same time. In addition, he had also cast the natal star array. All of these consumed a large amount of Zhenqi, and even Lu Ping felt his body getting weak. Lu Ping operated the Zhenqi in his body, and after a while, his slightly pale face was much better. Then he said to De Bao, "Don't talk nonsense, go and see what's inside." De Bao no longer had time to admire Lu Ping's bravery, and quickly turned and ran towards the open space. At this moment, a whirlpool suddenly appeared above Lu Ping's head. The whirlpool gradually expanded, and gradually formed a space portal. A suction force came from the whirlpool, as if it wanted to expel Lu Ping from this space. Lu Ping's expression changed, and he didn't have time to remind De Bao. He ran straight into the open space, shook his sleeve, and put away De Bao and the things he had just found. Just as Lu Ping put away De Bao, Lu Ping could no longer resist the suction force of the open space portal. He had no choice but to fly towards the portal in the sky. Next to the altar outside the Yingtian dojo, a space portal suddenly appeared, and Lu Ping jumped out from it. As soon as he landed and turned around, the portal had gradually shrunk. When the portal finally disappeared, Lu Ping saw the cross-section next to the altar. There was a dark groove on it, and a grayish clay pot was placed in it. Lu Ping removed the clay pot and found that there was no longer a drop of water in it. There was also no trace of water on the entire altar. Lu Ping muttered to himself for a moment, and then placed the clay pot back into the source of the abundant river. He filled it with water again and placed it back into the groove. However, there was no more movement from the altar. Lu Ping waited beside the altar for a moment, and found that the altar was no longer moving. Regretfully, he removed the clay pot and flew down the abundant river, heading towards the cave that Lao Zu had opened up in the cave. The water of the abundant river slowly flowed down from the source, and after many tributaries converged, the originally rapid river began to become deeper. About 10 feet below the river, the blue water moon pearl was suspended above Lu Ping's head, forming a shield. Lu Ping sat cross-legged inside the shield, recovering the large amount of true yuan that he had consumed. After continuously using his full strength, especially using several spirit communication and even spirit nurturing great treasures at the same time, Lu Ping's true yuan had been greatly consumed. Although Lu Ping had refined 2 portions of the Wonder Dew when he had advanced to the late stage of core forging, causing his true yuan's recovery speed to greatly increase, such an intense consumption of true yuan still required a lot of time for Lu Ping to recover. Lu Ping didn't expect that he would actually stay in the Abundant Heavens sect's training ground for 5 days. After entering the Abundant Heavens training ground, they first gathered the spiritual herbs and Debeo refined the growing soil powder from the spiritual herb garden. This alone took them 2 days. After that, everyone worked together to break the 5 rainbow-colored restrictions, and it took them another 3 days. In addition to the fact that Lu Ping had already been in the northern ice plains for 8 days, a total of 13 days had passed. Lu Ping had previously thought that the various sects Laozu of the Northern Sea would arrive at the northern ice plains in about half a month, but that was only a guess. Now that the time was almost up, he didn't know if the various sects Laozu had already arrived or not. At Lu Ping's cultivation level, there was no longer a need to deliberately maintain a state of closed-door cultivation to recover the true yuan in his body. As long as he could maintain the normal circulation of his body's cultivation technique, it would be fine. Lu Ping was still floating in the air within the Jade Water Moon Pearl's barrier. However, his tightly shut eyes had already opened. Then, with a shake of his sleeve, he placed the few items that he had discovered after breaking the 5th rainbow-colored restriction in front of him. This time, Debeo had only discovered 4 items. At that time, he had been in a rush, and the spatial door of the Abundant Heavens training ground had suddenly opened. When Lu Ping saw that the situation wasn't good, he hurriedly put away Debeo. He didn't know if the treasures in the newly opened location had already been found by Debeo. The first treasure was a wooden box that contained a book. At first, Lu Ping didn't know why most of the Ying Tian sect's heritage books were in the form of paper books and not jade scrolls. Compared to jade scrolls, paper books were much more difficult to preserve and contain information. Could it be that only the paper books were able to display the sect's profound heritage? Lu Ping didn't understand why Ying Tian sect's heritage books were in the form of paper books. However, when Lu Ping saw the title on the cover of this 1-inch thick book, he couldn't be bothered to ridicule the Abundant Heavens sect's inheritance system anymore. Abundant Heavens sect's array formation basics. It was an extremely ordinary name and seemed like a common item. However, this book was the foundation of the Abundant Heavens sect's array formation inheritance. If one wanted to inherit the array formation inheritance of the Abundant Heavens sect, then they could only enter the sect through the contents recorded in this book. Lu Ping roughly skimmed through the contents of the book. Although he didn't know much about array formations, he could still see that this book was extraordinary. Hu Lili had told Lu Ping that Sage Xianqian had once complained that the array formation inheritance of the Zhenling sect was not complete. This caused the array formation masters of the Zhenling sect to be able to set up extremely brilliant array formations during their cultivation process. However, the progress of the array formation master's own cultivation was extremely slow, and compared to cultivators of the same level, they were much weaker. This also caused the cultivation of array formation masters in the Zhenling sect to be extremely difficult. The imperfect foundation of array formation cultivation was one of the main reasons why array formation masters in the Zhenling sect had so many drawbacks. In reality, in the history of the Zhenling sect, none of the cultivators who chose the path of array formation masters were able to break through to the Dharma stage. It was extremely rare for someone like Sage Xianqian to reach the late core forging stage and become an array formation master. If it wasn't for Lu Ping's strong support, Hu Lili's cultivation progress and strength would definitely not have been able to remain at the forefront of the 3rd-generation disciples. In such a short period of time, she had the possibility of refining low-grade Earth-level spiritual objects and breaking through to the mid-core forging stage. However, it was undeniable that Hu Lili had relied on too many external factors to achieve her current achievements. In reality, Hu Lili had always been extremely conflicted. She was an extremely arrogant person and did not want to become a burden in the eyes of others just because her cultivation was too far behind Lu Ping's. However, the cultivation of array formation masters had always been difficult. In the end, she had no choice but to rely on external factors. This time, before Lu Ping came to the central mainland, Hu Lili was preparing to go into seclusion to break through to the mid-core forging stage. Lu Ping had given her a small forging spirit pill that he had refined himself, just in case. If Hu Lili had this complete array foundation inheritance from a large sect, she would be able to improve her own cultivation method. Then, Hu Lili might be able to go further in the future. Chapter 631. Lu Ping carefully examined the three necklace-like magic treasures in his hand for a long while before saying with some hesitation, "Could this be the demon-transforming bracelet?" Lu Ping shook his sleeve again and released De Bao. When De Bao came out and saw the surrounding river water, he felt somewhat uncomfortable. But after seeing the jade water moon pearl floating above Lu Ping's head, he relaxed and asked, "Boss, how is the thing we got from the fifth forbidden ground?" Lu Ping didn't say anything and directly threw the demon-transforming bracelet in his hand towards De Bao. De Bao didn't have time to dodge and the silver necklace-like magic treasure was already on his neck. De Bao lowered her head and looked at Lu Ping with a puzzled expression. Suddenly, Lu Ping's eyes glowed with a green light that was more than a foot long. Clearly, he was casting the three pure one's true pupils with all his might. Seeing this, De Bao knew that Lu Ping was most likely testing this necklace-like magic treasure on his body, so he didn't say anything. After a moment, the azure light in Lu Ping's eyes disappeared and a strange expression appeared on his face. He said, "Sure enough, this strange treasure is the demon-transforming bracelet." De Bao carefully looked at the demon-transforming bracelet on his neck and asked with some apprehension, "Boss, what is the demon-transforming bracelet?" Lu Ping waved his hand and the demon-transforming bracelet on De Bao's neck reappeared in Lu Ping's hand. He then explained to De Bao, the demon-transforming bracelet is said to be the unique magic treasure of a mysterious sect in the Middle Earth, the Spirit Beast sect. This magic treasure, when worn on the body of a demon, can conceal the demon's foundation and not be detected by human cultivators. It is the most ideal magic treasure for demon cultivators to walk the human cultivation world. De Bao's eyes suddenly lit up. He said, "That's so magical. Boss, can you give this thing to me? In any case, boss, you have 3 demon transformation chakrams." Lu Ping put the demonization bracelet on his wrist and said, "Your sense of smell can be considered a special technique among demon cultivators. Do you think I'm a human or a demon?" De Bao looked at Lu Ping with some astonishment, but he still sniffed around Lu Ping. A strange expression appeared on his face, and he said in surprise, "No way, boss, why do I find that you are no different from a monster race cultivator? Although I can't tell what kind of demon cultivator your demon chi is, you do have demon chi on you." Lu Ping took the demonization bracelet off his wrist and said, "Now you understand. This magic treasure that looks like a necklace and a bracelet is called the demonization bracelet in the human race, and the false demon bracelet in the demon race. It means that humans can pretend to be monster race cultivators if they wear it, and monster race cultivators can pretend to be human race cultivators if they wear it." De Bao immediately understood the value of these 3 magic treasures. Samling and Lu Qiner were both top monster race cultivators. Before they entered the Dharma stage, it was almost certain that Lu Ping would take them to the inheritance grounds of the 2 races to receive the last bloodline inheritance of the 2 races. This demonization bracelet might be of great help to Lu Ping on his trip to the monster race. Looking at these three magic treasures, De Bao couldn't help but say in surprise, "This is really too magical. I wonder how the spirit beast sect cultivators were able to make such magical treasures." Lu Ping also said with a sigh, "Legend has it that the spirit beast sect is a sect that is jointly controlled by the cultivators of both the human and demon races. No one knows whether the spirit beast sect cultivators who roam the cultivation world are humans or demons. This is because some of the high-level spirit beast sect cultivators wear this kind of necklace magic treasure when they appear in the cultivation world. Because of this, they are afraid of the spirit beast sect, which is a sect that combines humans and demons. Therefore, although the spirit beast sect cultivators rarely appear in the cultivation world, when they do, very few people are willing to provoke them." Lu Ping carefully placed these three magic treasures in his storage ring. Although it had only been 5 days since their trip to the Surplus Heavens sect, Lu Ping and the others had only managed to open 5 of the simplest restrictions despite their best efforts. Lu Ping was already very satisfied with this harvest. Lu Ping followed the flow of the river and was just about to release his divine sense to check where he had arrived. When he looked up, he just happened to see a fishing net suddenly fall from above, covering Lu Ping. Lu Ping was startled, but he immediately realized who was on the surface of the river. He smiled and said, "What a coincidence." Lu Ping casually waved his hand, and about 20 to 30 fish that were swimming past Lu Ping were swept up by Lu Ping. Lu Ping, on the other hand, moved and escaped from the net. When the net was retracted, the 20 to 30 fish had already been dragged up. Suddenly, a young man's surprised voice sounded from the river, "Haha, today's luck is not bad. I'll sell these 10 or so fat ones for money to pay for mother's treatment. The rest of the smaller ones can be eaten by myself." Just as the young man finished speaking, a clear and melodious voice sounded, seemingly dissatisfied. Then, he heard the young man say, "That won't do. You have to eat cooked food in the future, not raw food. Mother said that you have to be a human in the future, you can't always be a demon." A strange look appeared in Lu Ping's eyes, but he did not pay too much attention to it. After all, De Bao had already warned this kid that there should be demons around him, but he did not expect it to be a little demon at the early stage of the blood-refining realm that had yet to mature. Just as Lu Ping was about to return to the rocky cave, he heard a hearty laugh. Lu Ping's expression changed. Then, he heard the young man say happily, "So it's Immortal Kai. This kid pays his respects to the immortal." Then, a voice that Lu Ping had heard on the lone peak of Celestial Mountain was heard. "Little boy from the Du family, it seems that you've had a good harvest today. How is your mother's illness? I heard that 2 days ago, you invited a disciple from our sect to treat your mother. Has there been any improvement in the past 2 days? I dare not hide this from you, immortal." Du Jialua hesitated for a moment before replying, "Although my mother's illness has improved, she has not fully recovered." "Oh, there's such a thing." Immortal Kai's tone was full of surprise. Then, he said angrily, "Whose sect's disciple is this?" Not only did he accept spirit stones from mortals, he actually accepted spirit stones from others and did not complete the task properly. When we return to the sect, he will definitely be punished severely. Du Jialua's panicked voice immediately sounded. "Immortal, you can't blame me. It's just that my mother has been suffering from a chronic illness for many years. It's difficult for her to recover." After a while, Immortal Kai's voice sounded again. "Lead the way. I'd like to see what kind of chronic illness it is that even a cultivator can't cure." Du Jialua's joyful voice immediately sounded. "Then, thank you very much, Immortal Kai. I will return to the village now. Please wait for a moment." Then, the sound of paddling water could be heard. However, Lu Ping's divine sense was currently locked onto a small creature that didn't dare to move. When Kai Yun flew over, this small creature hid under the boat and didn't dare to show itself. For some reason, Kai Yun didn't notice that there was a monster hiding under the small boat. Lu Ping thought for a moment. Then, he stretched out his hand and cut a hole in the barrier formed by the aquamoon pearls. 3 small snakes, green, blue, and white, suddenly appeared in the surplus river. Lu Ping opened his mouth and said something. The 3 small snakes nodded at Lu Ping, turned around, and disappeared without a trace. Looking in the direction Samling disappeared, Lu Ping seemed a bit worried. He placed a palm-sized turtle into the surplus river. Putting aside the fact that Lu Ping had returned to his cave abode along the river, Du Jialua, who was filled with joy, rode towards the Du family village with an even more powerful immortal in his eyes. He didn't notice the strange look in Kai Yun's eyes as he stood at the bow of the boat. The Du family village wasn't small. There were about 1,000 people in the village. Du Jialua's father had died a long time ago, so he was raised by his widowed mother. However, Du Jialua was born with great strength. By the time he was 10, he was as tall as a 13 or 14-year-old boy, and his strength was no weaker than an adult's. During this time, Du Jialua's mother was already suffering from a chronic illness. Thus, the 10-year-old Du Jialua began to follow the hunters in the mountains to hunt and the fishermen to fish in the surplus river. At the same time, he took care of the family's 2 mu of farmland. Because he was born with great strength and was smart, he quickly learned how to hunt and fish. He also took good care of the family's 2 mu of farmland. Thus, in just a year, Du Jialua had his own fishing boat. His family's circumstances also improved a lot. The villagers admired him for being able to support his family at such a young age. They affectionately called him Du Lang. When Du Jialua docked his fishing boat at the ferry and returned to the village, many villagers greeted him when they saw him. However, when the crowd saw Kai Yun following behind Du Jialua, all of them became cautious and respectful. It had only been 2 years since the Surplus Heavens Immortal sect started selecting young men of suitable age to open their bloodlines. Back then, Kai Yun had followed his 3rd uncle to the Du clan village to host the ceremony. The mortals in the village all knew that he was an immortal elder of the Surplus Heavens Immortal sect. However, when they heard that Immortal Kai had come to treat Du Jialua's wife, the villagers all praised the Yingtian Immortal sect's benevolence. However, as Kai Yun followed Du Jialua back to his home, a grave expression gradually appeared on his face as they approached. In a small farmhouse surrounded by fences, there were 3 wooden houses arranged in a triangular formation. One of the wooden houses looked like it had just been renovated, but its door was tightly shut. Du Jialua walked into the fenced courtyard and shouted excitedly, "Mother, Immortal Kai from the Yingtian Immortal sect is here. Your illness will definitely be cured this time." After Du Jialua shouted excitedly, the house in the middle was completely silent. Kai Yun unknowingly stood at the gate of the fenced courtyard. He didn't walk into the courtyard. He looked at the small wooden house in front of him with a gloomy expression. However, he quickly calmed down. A gray talisman had appeared in his half-clenched left hand. Du Jialua looked doubtfully at the wooden house and shouted, "Mother, are you at home? Immortal Kai from the Yingtian Immortal sect is here. Quickly come out and welcome him." However, the wooden house was still completely silent. Du Jialua muttered to himself, "Is she not at home? After father passed away, mother's health has always been poor. She rarely goes out." After saying that, Du Jialua walked to the front of the wooden house and stretched out his hand to push the door open. However, just as Du Jialua's hand was about to reach the door of the wooden house, the door suddenly opened from the inside. A woman in her 30s, with a delicate figure and an abnormally pale face, swayed as she stood at the door. When Du Jialua saw the woman appear in front of him, he couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment. Then, joy appeared on his face as he said, "Mother, so you are at home. Quickly come and see, this is Immortal Kai from the Yingtian Immortal sect. Immortal Kai has just agreed to treat mother's illness." The woman glanced at Kai Yun, who was standing in front of the fence with a smile on his face. She hurriedly walked out of the wooden house and bowed to Kai Yun. She said, "This lowly concubine, Madame Du, greets immortal Kai. It is my great fortune to have troubled immortal Kai to treat this lowly concubine's illness." After seeing Du Jialuo's mother leave the wooden house, Kai Yun's expression became much more relaxed. However, he still didn't put away the gray talisman in his left hand. He bowed slightly and said, "Healing the wounded and dying is the duty of the Ying Tian immortal sect. Madam, there is no need to be so polite." Inside the wooden house, Kai Yun casually looked at the decorations in the house and asked, "Intentionally or unintentionally, may I ask Madam, is there only Madam and your son living in this family?" Madame Du softly said, "Immortal, my late husband passed away 10 years ago, leaving only the two of us to depend on each other." Kai Yun nodded and asked again, "Did Madam interact with anyone in the past? Did you have a good relationship with any family?" Madame Du imperceptibly furrowed her brows and said, "My late husband was very friendly with most of the people in the village. After my late husband passed away, this lowly concubine rarely went out to socialize and had little contact with the other families. After Jialuo grew up, he was the one who came to greet the people in the village." A strange look flashed through Kai Yun's eyes. He murmured in a voice that only he could hear, "That's strange." Du Jialuo didn't know why immortal Kai didn't immediately treat his mother's illness after entering his house. Instead, he asked all sorts of questions and said some things that didn't sound very clear. Thus, he softly asked, "Immortal Kai, how is my mother's illness?" Kai Yun seemed to have a sudden realization and smiled. "When I entered your house just now, I discovered some clues. However, I still have to wait for treatment before I can make a conclusion." Du Jialuo hurriedly said, "In that case, thank you very much, Immortal." Madame Du looked at Kai Yun and slowly placed her wrist flat. Kai Yun extended a finger to touch her meridian. A wave of Fa Li directly entered Madame Du's blood vessels. Then, it followed the blood vessels and rushed directly to her heart. At the same time, Kai Yun stared closely at Madame Du's expression. However, Madame Du seemed to feel nothing at this moment. Her head was half lowered, but her face seemed to be even paler. Seeing that Kai Yun's Fa Li was about to enter Madame Du's heart, the surging Fa Li would definitely burst her heart and cause Madame Du to vomit blood and die. Kai Yun suddenly pulled back his finger and withdrew the Fa Li that was flowing along the blood vessels to her heart. Then, Kai Yun pointed his finger again. This time, he was seriously feeling Madame Du's meridians. Du Jialuo looked at Kai Yun with a hopeful expression. He did not know that in that instant, his mother had already taken a walk through the gates of hell. After a long time, Kai Yun frowned and opened his eyes. He said, "Madame's body is weak. It seems to be a congenital illness. If it was a normal person, they wouldn't have lived past the age of 20. However, Madame has survived until now and even got married and had a child. In the eyes of mortals, this is already unbelievable." Madame Du's pale face smiled. "Jialuo is not my son. He was born to my late husband and his ex-wife. After my late husband passed away, I raised Jialuo. Jialuo is only 12 years old. Now, Jialuo is raising this lowly concubine." Kai Yun looked at Du Jialuo in shock. Du Jialuo asked anxiously, "Immortal, is my mother's illness really that serious? Is there a way to cure it?" Kai Yun could see that Du Jialuo did not care if he was Madame Du's biological son. It was obvious that he already knew about this. However, when he thought of the Du family system, Kai Yun could not help but frown. A congenital illness like this was not incurable in the cultivation world. However, if one wanted to completely cure it, they would have to consume some natural treasures. It was not that the Surplus River sect did not have such things, but it was not worth it to waste such treasures on an ordinary mortal woman. Kai Yun had originally scoffed at the method his third uncle had suggested. Since they were going to abduct someone's child, why would they take care of his parents? Wasn't this the same as being a prostitute and having a chastity memorial? From Kai Yun's point of view, they should just kill the entire family and bring Du Jialua back to the sect. No one would seek revenge in the future. After all, they were just a family of mortals. Thinking of this, Kai Yun's body unknowingly carried a trace of murderous intent. The Du clan seemed to be unaware of it, but Du Jialua, who had been hunting in the mountains all year round, suddenly felt as if his skin was being pricked by needles. However, this feeling only lasted for a moment. He never expected that this highly respected immortal before him would actually want to silence his mother. In the end, Kai Yun still suppressed this thought in his heart. He did not dare to directly disobey the orders of his third uncle, the alchemy master of the Yinghe sect. After pondering for a moment, he took out a jade bottle from the storage bag at his waist and handed it to Du Jialua reluctantly. He said, "This is a secret elixir of our sect. With this bottle of elixir, even if your mother's illness cannot be cured, it will not endanger her life. If this bottle of elixir is used on a mortal like your mother, it can extend her life by at least 30 years. It will be enough for her to die of old age." Although Du Jialua was slightly regretful that he could not cure his mother's illness, he was ecstatic to be able to obtain a bottle of elixir that could extend his mother's life. Du Jialua thanked Immortal Kai repeatedly. Immortal Kai seemed to enjoy the feeling of being worshipped. When he saw that Du Jialua was almost done bowing, he waved his hand and released a ball of magic power to stop him from bowing. Just as he was about to say something, his expression suddenly changed. He said, "Old man was right. There is indeed a demon hidden here." As soon as Kai Yun finished speaking, he disappeared from the wooden house. A shrill scream suddenly rang out from outside the door. Then, Kai Yun shouted angrily in an imposing manner, "What a demon! How dare you appear in the territory under the jurisdiction of the Yinghe sect? The Du clan lady's illness must be related to you. Why are you still not surrendering? Do you want me to kill you directly?" Du Jialua's expression changed when he heard this. He looked at his stepmother pleadingly. However, at some point, the Du clan lady's pale face had turned deathly pale. Her eyes had turned blood red and she suddenly let out a low growl. "You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.